Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Monday, the 21st of July, 2025. My name is Ndoro. Welcome to Channel Africa Radio, where we bring you the African perspective. And the best way to start your day with this program called Rise and Shine. Welcome to it, everybody, and good morning to you, Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, everybody. Hoping everyone had a great weekend. As we start the new week, let's go straight into it. We are together for the next 3 hours, and in this first hour, we'll be looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo signing a mining exploration agreement with a US company in an attempt to boost American investments. And the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, voices his support for South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Those stories and more coming up. I hope you had a great weekend, Peter.
I did actually, I must say. Yeah, it was restful, feeling stronger because I had this cough, but we're getting there.
We're getting there. Oh, that's what we want to hear. Let's get to our news. First bulletin for Rise and Shine on this Monday. Here's Jalane Tulongwepe, and then Figile Lingwati will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Kenyan police have arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi and plan to arraign him today on suspicion of facilitating terrorist act linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations said on X that detectives had arrested Mwangi at his home in Machakos County at the weekend and had seized 2 unused tear gas canisters and a 17.62 millimeter blank round, along with 2 mobile phones and a laptop and notebooks. In addition, Mwangi is also due to be arraigned for unlawful possession of ammunition. There's tension in the country as hundreds of Kenyans took to the streets last month following the death in police custody of political blogger Albert Ojwang. The South African police have launched an investigation into the deadly collapse of a Western Cape building. This follows a damning report by the Council for the Built Environment, which highlighted multiple failures, including the use of substandard materials, structural cracks, and visible gaps. 34 construction workers were killed and 28 others injured when the multi-story building collapsed in May last year. Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Dean McPherson says the collapse was preventable.
The geotechnical study of the site, critical in determining soil stability and groundwater conditions, was not only incomplete, but it was grossly deficient. Key tests and geological mappings were missing. The health and safety agent appointed to monitor site compliance resigned midway through the project, stating clearly that they could no longer ensure safe working conditions. But this was not reported, and if it had been, the site would have been closed.
Operation Dudula says the strain that undocumented migrants are putting on South Africa's healthcare systems is evident. The civil organization has justified their actions, saying they are driven by the complaints of the citizens. This after it was criticized for preventing undocumented migrants from entering public healthcare facilities. Operation Dudula President Zandile Dabula.
People have been complaining that they go to the clinics, it's full, or they wake up very early in the morning to go in queue, and then by 12, then the line will be cut because the healthcare workers now they will not manage to work 24 hours. So they will cut the line and ask them to come back tomorrow. Or sometimes if they are being seen by the nurses, then there's no medication.
South Africa's Department of Health says it is embarking on a massive campaign to encourage members of the public to donate body organs and tissues in a bid to save lives. The department says there's reluctancy to donate organs due to cultural and religious stereotypes. Department spokesperson Foster Mohale says members of society can donate organs while still alive or issue instructions to have their organs donated after they've passed away. Mohale says there are more than 2,000 patients awaiting organ and tissue donors across the country.
Definitely, there are about over 2,500 people who are on the active waiting list to receive either organ or tissue in South Africa. So this is the only list that we know. So we've realized that because of lack of knowledge, but because of cultural or religious barriers, which we believe that as the department working with our partner organizations like Organ Donor Foundation and other organizations, we can be able to change people's perceptions around the issue of organ and tissue donation and save lives.
And finally, officials in Germany and Iran say fresh talks are expected to take place next week on Tehran's nuclear program. Iran has consistently denied that its nuclear facilities, which were targeted by the US and Israeli airstrikes last month, had been used to develop nuclear weapons. The BBC's Liz Doucette has the story.
A deadline is looming for Iran. European ministers are warning if there is no progress on a nuclear deal by the end of August, they will have no choice but to reimpose the punishing sanctions they had lifted as part of the 2015 nuclear agreement. European diplomatic sources say they may be ready to extend that deadline to allow more time for talks, but they say they're still discussing when and where to meet. Iran is also under pressure to return to bilateral negotiations with the US.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In the sports headline, the Springboks are the Junior World Rugby Under-20 champions. Banyana Banyana are happy to keep the WAFCON title defense alive. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Right, so every day or Monday to Friday on Rise and Shine, we bring you a roundup of some news that happened over the weekend. It's Monday today, that you could have missed, and throwing forward into what to expect in developments moving forward in news making headlines in and around our continent. We call this the Africa Roundup. And today we start with the Democratic Republic of Congo, who has signed a mining exploration agreement with a U.S. company in an attempt to boost American investments in a sector that has largely been dominated by Chinese firms. The signing ceremony was presided over by the DRC President, Felix Tshisekedi, in the capital, Kinshasa. Chris Ochamringa has more.
The Congolese government signed the mining deal with the U.S. firm Cobalt Metals. The head of the company, Benjamin Katabuka, said they will use advanced technology to extract lithium in Manono in the DRC's southern province of Tanganyika. The mining deal comes just weeks after the U.S. government brokered a peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda aimed at ending a decades-long war in the east of Africa's second biggest country. Earlier this year, the DRC president, Felix Tshisekedi, offered to grant the U.S. access to his country's minerals in exchange for support from the Trump administration in ending the war. The U.S. accepted and mediated the peace agreement, but some Congolese citizens have criticized the government for signing the deal, which they say prioritized geopolitical and economic interests rather than justice and reconciliation for the communities affected by the war.
Finance ministers and central bank governors from the Group of 20 have reaffirmed the need for central bank independence and stronger global cooperation. Their commitments were outlined in a communiqué released at the close of a two-day summit in South Africa. Christy Kilburn has the details for us.
It was an issue that hung heavily over the meeting following U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated berating of U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The communiqué is the group's first since last October, a month before Trump's election victory and subsequent tariff war. In it, the ministers and central bankers highlighted the uncertainty in the global economy caused by conflicts, trade tensions, and frequent extreme weather events. Speaking to reporters, South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo stressed the importance of free trade.
If we keep fragmenting and not solve problems collectively beyond nation states. Through nation states, of course, humanity will be in crisis.
The communique recognized the importance of the World Trade Organization, while adding the body needed reform.
The Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, has voiced his support for South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. His remarks come amid mounting pressure from critics and left-wing Labour MPs urging the UK government to take a firmer stance against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Khan made the statement during his visit to Africa, which included stops in South Africa, Nigeria and Ghana.
I think the world has been too silent for too long across the globe. People I speak to are in admiration of South Africa for bringing the case in the ICJ, but also the moral authority South Africa has is really important. I think it's really important that, in particular, President Trump uses his influence over Prime Minister Netanyahu, who listens to nobody, quite clearly, to try and exert pressure on him, not just to have a ceasefire, not just for it to be permanent, but for there to be justice for the Palestinians. We need a two-state solution, and the actions from the Israelis is unacceptable, which is why South Africa did the right thing bringing the case. And in London, we see on a weekly basis tens and thousands of Londoners protesting against what's happening in Gaza and also in West Bank as well.
Got the poll.
Hundreds of Liberians have taken to the streets of Monrovia demanding action from President Joseph Boakai's government over worsening economic conditions and alleged corruption. Now, the protests were led by the civic group for Solidarity and Trust for a New Day. Sean Hogan picks up the story for us.
Organisers had planned to deliver a petition to the executive mansion in Monrovia. However, police declared the area restricted, drawing criticism from protest leaders.
And they shall be converging at the center of Monrovia, the capital, specifically on Capital Bypass, and to say to President Boakai, enough of the hardship, enough of the corruption, enough of the mismanagement of state resources, enough of the hypocrisy, enough of the deplorable healthcare sector.
Boakai won a 2023 runoff election against former President George Weah. Demonstrations suspended more than 450 officials in February, including ministers and ambassadors, for failing to declare assets. Protesters said they are concerned about the rising cost of living, alleged police misconduct, and political pressure on opposition voices.
Zambia has signed investment agreements worth $3 billion following the inaugural Invest Zambia International Conference, which wrapped up on Friday. The three-day event attracted over 1,300 participants from around the world, highlighting growing investor confidence in Zambia's economic transformation agenda. Zambia's Technology and Science Minister, Felix Mutati, has more.
Our commitment to economic reform and private sector-led development is unwavering. We have embarked on policy and structural reforms designed to create a stable macroeconomic environment, restore investor confidence, and promote value addition and export growth, including one of the fundamental anchors of joint ventures. Zambia's future depends on investment that creates jobs, build local capacity, and contribute to national priorities such as in energy security, food security, and my famous one, digital resilience and redundancy.
That's how we come to the end of today's Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow after the news. And coming up, we zoom into more stories of what's happened over the weekend and get analysis with our resident analyst there, Mighty Jamie. He'll be speaking to Peter, so stay with us.
The Upside, your afternoons just got even better. Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Diredi, Simbewe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever.
We are the upside. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week. Your morning companion
with the stories that matter.
This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's Monday morning, and at this time every week we do what we call the Roundup Wrap, and that's our weekly segment where we take a step back and reflect on some of the major developments that took place across the continent and beyond as they relate to our continent. Key stories also, when we get time, what might happen in the week ahead. And also, as always, we are joined by our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, who gives us his insights. So very good morning to you, Mighty. I hope you had a good week.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the viewers and listeners. Yes, I did have a good week.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, so let's start in East Africa. Boniface Mwangi's arrest, over alleged links to last month's deadly protests and terror-related charges that he's facing has sparked a widespread concern. What does it tell you about how, I want to use a polite word, but I can't, heavy-handed the Kenyan government has become in terms of people protesting against it?
Well, it does indicate quite actually that they've chosen this route, and it's not a new choice. If you recall, earlier this year, BBC released a documentary of sorts tracing how the Kenyan government had responded to the protests even last year. And there was use of live ammunition, and they tracked down a few members of the military who were in the protest last year, the initial anti-tax increase protests. And it looks as if Ruto's administration is continuing with that particular direction. Earlier, we had seen that there had been rhetoric of, there's an attempt at a coup, there's some kind of insurgency being sponsored or promoted, and this was coming from various ministers and various leaders within the Kenyan administration already. So I think the person who had said that was the Interior Cabinet Secretary, Kipchumba Murkomen. He had said something to that effect earlier before they had gotten to the stage. So they're now at the point where they're arresting people that they view as having been influential in the protests, and then saying they have all of these weapons and artifacts which can be used for the advancement of insurgency, if you will. Having said all of that, some of the things that they accuse him of having, tear gas and a few other things, they're not tantamount to what would be the weapons of someone orchestrating a coup or tantamount to someone who's pushing an insurgency. It may very well be that he has those weapons and artifacts or tools, whatever, because some of the things that they're saying, he has multiple laptops, etc. These would be the things that an activist would have, especially if an activist is being sponsored in terms of the public saying, hey, you have a voice, why don't you set up a war room or something to that effect, because it was very difficult for Kenyan youth to get the message out. And you may find that he had VPNs or something to that effect to get the message out on the internet, because at some point internet access was not readily available for them. So he's already said that he is not a terrorist, is the language that he used. And I think this may have a backfiring effect, in fact, because one of the things that I've been thinking about the whole time is there's no leader in this particular protest, and there's no galvanizing voice, so to speak. But what the Kenyan government, in doing or trying to set an example with Boniface Mwangi, is actually creating a figurehead, creating that galvanizing, unifying figure. The other galvanizing and unifying figures so far have been the people who have been killed as a result of the heavy-handed responses from the police. If you recall, one of the big things that triggered this round of protests was the death of Albert Ojwang, who was taken from his home and within a few days died, and then there was no clarity around the conditions of his death. People did eventually get arrested as a result of the protests which broke out. So already the Kenyan government has shown that they're willing to be heavy-handed. The killing of Albert Ojwang, I think this year, was one of the examples of that. But he was not the only person who died. A few days later, a few other activists were killed as well. We know that 19 or 20 people died in this last round of protests. Add that number up to the protesters last year, Peter, you can already begin to see that the Ruto response seems to be a draconian response. It seems to be a heavy-handed response, and it seems to be losing him this critical generation. So one of the conversations that was happening before was that he was still likely to win the next election because there wasn't a coalition of opposition voices strong enough to defeat him. I wonder if that will remain to be the case if he now continues down this path, because if Boniface is acquitted or someone else emerges from this particular group of young leaders, that may be enough to create a Bobby Wine effect in a country where even if you are being repressive, there's not enough that you can do to stop a popular candidate winning an election.
Does it worry you what's happening in East Africa generally? I mean, Uganda's been a problem for quite a while, but you're starting to see similar traits in places like Tanzania. Kenya seems to have escalated. People complain that this kind of thing's been going on for years, but maybe it's escalating or it's better exposed. But it seems as if East Africa is going on the same track in these major countries.
It does worry me, Peter, because the youth of East Africa have a lot of potential. And one of the things that is holding them back is poor leadership. And poor leadership in one respect, that there is corruption, because the dictators are actually trying to maintain corrupt economic ecosystems. And in so doing, they're preventing some of these young people creating capable states, executing their mandates, because you have all of these older politicians who want to eat and they want to live these lavish lifestyles, which are even lavish by European or American standards, off the back of struggling economies or marginalized economies. So as things stand right now, that's something that I think we have to be concerned about, because these are young populations. You've got a well-educated populations in East Africa. The biggest liability now is the repression that you're identifying, because if it's Tanzania, if it's Uganda, and it's Kenya, all taking tactics from the same book and repeating those tactics across the board, that kind of democratic regression, I think, will definitely not help the youth of those particular countries, because the big hope has been over time that as these leaders approach, their eventual demise, the natural demise, that there will be some kind of restoration of the order. Bobby Wine was actually in South Africa recently talking about next year's election. But if repression becomes normalized and there's nobody willing to push back on that repression for strategic geopolitical reasons, what that does, it is resets the clock and allows the next person around those dictators to enter into power and use those tools to prolong the repression suppression, to prolong the corruption, to prolong the suppression of those particular populations. So it is particularly a concern, Peter.
Another country of concern, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, on the face of it, it looks as if some progress in the conflict in the east of the country is being made, as the government and M23 rebels have pledged to sign a peace deal by mid-August, and this follows the Qatari-led mediation. I'm thinking, hang on, weren't we all celebrating just the other week that something was signed in Washington? Now Qatar. Is this significant, or is this much ado about nothing?
With these particular types of events, I think we should be concerned, because you're right. Trump was touting his peace deal and saying that he had everything knuckled down. Now we are seeing another set of signatures in Qatar this time around. The question then becomes, which deal is valid? Where is the goodwill? Why do we have a duplication of this particular process at this stage? And this seems to be something that continues to plague the region and DRC in particular. And I think it's justified to ask these questions. What we may have to really wait for is to see if there is going to be an integration of M23 leaders and militias into the army, and if there is going to be a real handover of the parts of East DRC which have been captured so far. There are some political rivalries that are still at play. We saw Kabila, we saw a few other people doing the rounds in a way that suggested that this thing was deeper than we anticipated initially, because we just thought it was Kagame and the M23. But when we saw Kabila doing the rounds in the SADC region, as well as trying to make a case for the M23 movement in and of itself, that was something that led to questions around whether this is going to be stable or long term. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the resource issues continue to be at the background, but to be the most important issue. And we have to then look at the mining deals that emanate from this, not necessarily the paper, but if there's actually going to be excavation of a site and we start seeing, the tractors and all of the other, equipment coming onto site to start building the mine, then we will know what deals have been made. Because right now, a lot of things are in the air, and we will only know really who is the power broker and what is material and what is imaginary when there starts to be a shift on the ground, if there is going to be any shift on the ground.
Still in the DRC, the government has sponsored Barcelona Football Club. Rwanda got into trouble for this, for signing up with Arsenal. But one wonders if the DRC can convince that its $46 million investment can help with branding the country. What do you think they hope to achieve? I see more problems than gains with this particular one.
So do I. I mean, this just reminds me of a township situation where if one neighbor builds a nice wall, the next neighbor wants to build a wall. And before you know it, the whole neighborhood has the same type of wall, but not all of the people in the neighborhood can afford that type of infrastructure. And this is the question that I had. I mean, South Africa at some point considered a similar deal, and it was shut down because the finances were not in the right position to spend so much. And that was 50 million rand, which is about 2.5 million US dollars. And in this particular case, we're seeing a much bigger spend on Barcelona by the government of the DRC. And I'm not sure what is the value at all in respect to this, because they don't even have any tourist-ready destinations. It's still a grossly underdeveloped area. I mean, many people have spoken about the lack of development in the DRC. So even if I did see, Barca winning the game and think I can go to DRC, as soon as I do a travel review on YouTube, I'm then going to see that it's not a safe country for me as an international tourist, European, American, or otherwise. So the gains seem to be minuscule. It seems to be an ego-driven thing to show that they could also do what Rwanda is doing. But particularly, we must be very aware that the levels of poverty in the DRC do not justify this kind of a spend. I just think it's shameful that it's happening now. And I don't know, maybe there was a cash injection from somewhere in respect to all of these deals we're talking about. Maybe the Qataris have been pumping in some side money and made this deal for them, but it's quite shameful, Peter. I must be quite honest.
Yeah, it reminds me when the country was still Zaire and they sponsored that fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. And no other country in the world could afford it. And yet they dug deep in the midst of poverty and put this fight on. My goodness.
Well, I'm grateful they did it because I love the fight,
Yeah,
but I'm
it
not
was
grateful on
brilliant,
behalf
wasn't it?
of the people. It was.
Yeah.
But that's a timely and accurate and apt reference, because it just shows that once again, they're going into, the examples or repeating the history that doesn't need to be repeated right now, Peter.
Indeed. Mighty Jamie, we're going to have to leave it there. Always good talking to you. Have a fabulous week ahead, my brother.
You too, and to all the listeners, to wishing a good week.
Thank you. That's Jamie, always keeping us up to date with the stories that shaped our continent in the week that was. It's now time to find out the stories that are shaping this day with our news headlines. Here's Jwalani Tulangwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, Kenyan police have arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi and plan to arraign him today on suspicion of facilitating terrorist act linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. South Africa's Chief Justice Mandi Samaya has issued directions in former President Jacob Zuma and the Umkhonto weSizwe Party's legal challenge against President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to place police minister on special leave this after Zuma and the MK Party filed papers in the Apex Court to challenge the said decision. And finally, officials in Germany and Iran say fresh talks are expected to take place next week on Tehran's nuclear program. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now the South Africa's World Under-20 Rugby champions, the junior Boks, have beat New Zealand in the final of the World Cup Championship. Let's hear what the captain has to say about that. Here's Fikile Lingwati with the details and our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Asanda. We start off with that rugby story this hour. Captain of South Africa's World Under-20 Rugby Champions, Riley Norton, says the country has the most talent of all nations at schoolboy level, which will make it tough to stop the Springboks' current momentum. The Junior Boks beat New Zealand 23-15 in the final of the World Championships in Rovingo in Italy to end a 13-year drought in the tournament. South African teams now hold the men's world crowns at the under-20 and senior level, as well as in the sevens format. The skills and talent in local rugby is undeniable, and Captain Riley Norton says the final mental maturity was also on display.
When you're in the lead, it can cross your mind that I try to straight away get back to what's at hand. And I think everyone was reminding us that we can never be complacent, especially against a team like New Zealand, which are unbelievable. As soon as you switch off and you give them an opportunity, they can take it, and they're deadly in that. So, of course, it crosses your mind, but at the end of the day, you've got to stay in the present, and you just got to focus from the play to the play and whistle to whistle, because I think if you just think about the future and what's to come, I think that's when you can get yourself in quite a tricky situation and see yourself conceding points.
The foundation for Springbok rugby is in place and strong, according to the under-20 coach, Kevin Foote.
Once you put these guys in the environment and the environment's right for them, they'll flourish. Riley's a point in case. Riley finished school last year. He plays in the Type 5 and he now captains us. He's still going to be here next year, but I do believe that this is such a talented group, and in the right environment, they'll kick on. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of these names going forward for South African rugby, and especially in the URC.
On to football news now. Banyana, the defending champions of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, have advanced to the semi-finals of this year's edition of the tournament in Morocco. Banyana, who topped Group C with 2 wins and a draw, beat Senegal 4-1 on penalties in their quarter-final match played in Ojuda. The match was goalless after extra time. Banyana will meet 9 times champions Nigeria in Casablanca on Tuesday. The Super Falcons qualified for the semi-finals with a dominant 5-0 victory over Zambia on Friday. And Kenyan youngster Clinton Aluvi led the way at the Africa Under-18 and Under-20 Championships in Nigeria with victory in the men's 100 meters. Aluvi cut the tape in 10.42 seconds to win gold in the Under-20 category as Botswana's Ledebele Karabo claimed silver by clocking 10.54 seconds in second. Nigeria's John Caleb bagged bronze after finishing third in 10.61 seconds. There was more delight for Kenya as Lawi Ngetich grabbed gold in the boys under-18 1,500 meters final, timing 3 minutes 45.67 seconds to win the race. And let's end with the University Games in Germany. South African swimmer Peter Kutse has explained how he switched gears to clinch the first gold medal for the country at the FISU World University Games in Germany, setting up another record in the 100-meter backstroke. Kutse smashed his own personal best and national as well as continental record from the previous night to win gold with a time of 51.99 seconds. It's an achievement that puts Team South Africa on the map as one of the powerhouses in the water at major events. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwadi.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Right, it's time now on Channel Africa to take a look at the first look this week on what's been happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, aviation expert Guy Leach says the aviation industry has not fully recovered since COVID-19. He says FlySafair is low-cost carrier and always attempts to keep its cost down as far as possible. This comes as more than 200 FlySafair pilots affiliated to Workers' Union Solidarity are set to embark on a 2-week strike from today. Solidarity says they've given the employer notice to strike following a deadlock in wage negotiations. The union has rejected the airline's proposed 5.7% salary increase. Leach says FlySafair is faced with a lot of challenges and that might take time to resolve.
But I mean, I think that what's aggravating the situation right now is certainly these claims by Solidarity that the two senior executives, the CEO and the CFO of the airline, are pocketing as much as 90 million rand in terms of shares that they're selling. And it's obviously very worrying that they're selling shares. It's never a good sign when senior management starts selling off shares. But then the airline's got its other problems, as we know. It's got this whole problem of its foreign ownership limitations, which it fell foul of the Air Services Licensing Council at the end of last year. That one has still not properly been solved or landed, if you like.
However, Gordon says they are optimistic that there's still room to find one another as wage talks are set to continue.
And to the rest of the pilot body, we look forward to, an open and meaningful negotiation and ultimately to rebuilding a very meaningful relationship with the team. Genuinely, our teams are very important to us. Our pilots are very important to us. And this will pass. We will find common ground and we look forward to continuing a very strong working relationship.
South African e-commerce company Takealot Group is ramping up on-demand delivery by repurposing its Mr. D takeaway food platform to handle pet supplies, toys and other high-frequency purchase items in a bid to fend off growing competition. Mr. D, which before the COVID-19 pandemic focused on doorstep food delivery, has been repositioning itself as a broader convenience marketplace, a strategy born out of desperation 5 years ago when restaurant operations were restricted. His chief executive says he is betting big on Mr. D to lead its next phase of growth as consumers demand more immediacy and convenience. Ghana's central bank says that an emergency meeting of its Monetary Policy Committee MPC held last week had considered whether to take immediate action, but held off until a regular meeting later this month. In a statement, the bank has noted that a broad range of macroeconomic indicators had improved as the West African country emerges from its most severe economic crisis in decades. The bank says inflation expectations are broadly anchored, external buffers have strengthened, and confidence in the economy is returning. And finally, oil prices are little changed as traders assess the impact of new European sanctions on Russian oil supply, while they also worry about tariffs possibly weakening fuel demand as Middle East producers are raising output. Brent crude futures fell $0.01 to $69.27 a barrel after settling at 0.35% lower on Friday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $67.44 a barrel, up 10 cents following a 0.30% decline in the previous session. Your financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,527 naira, and Botswana is 13.29. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 60, and in Zambia is 22.85. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rubles 56. Russia is 78 rubles 16. India is 85 rupees 91. China at 7 yuan 17, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 87. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,354 and platinum at $1,427 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $69.37 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Our G20 fact for this Monday, the 21st of July. Did you know South Africa's participation in the G20 is guided by the country's 4 foreign policy pillars? These are the national interests, the African agenda, South-South cooperation, and multilateralism. South Africa officially assumed the presidency of the G20 on the 1st of December 2024, making it the first country on the African continent to lead the Premier Forum. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation's SABC Sport brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about South Africa's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Who can forget? It's started on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. You can still tune in every Sunday for all the highs and the heartache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus as well, anytime, anywhere, and no subscription is required. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, it's time to take a look at this story, and it is quite interesting. The African Union reached a critical milestone in its fight against gender-based violence at the just concluded AU Mid-Year Summit in Malabo. 5 countries officially signed the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls, a groundbreaking legal instrument that seeks to comprehensively prevent and prohibit and eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls across the continent. The convention, adopted earlier this year during the 38th Ordinary Session of the AU Assembly, is more than symbolic in its legally binding once ratified, and covers violence in both public and private spaces, including cyberspace, during peace as well as conflict, disaster, and recovery. Now, with strong provisions on justice, survivor support, and preventative education, it seems that this could be a major step towards a more gender-equal Africa. To help us unpack the achievement and what it means going forward, I spoke to Honourable Janet Ramotile Sala Njai, the African Union's Special Rapporteur on Rights of Women in Africa, and she's also a Commissioner at the African Commission on Human People Rights. I began by asking her, what is the status of women and girls across the continent at this time?
My capacity as the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, it is my responsibility to monitor the promotion and the protection of women's rights within the continent as a whole. And within the continent, as we speak, as you have rightly indicated, it's not a matter of one country. It's a continent-wide issues. Challenges that we have presently confronted with relate to the issue of violence against women, which is a systemic and endemic issue throughout the continent, and I must say globally also, because it's not only in Africa that we experience violence against women, but it's a challenge that we have in the continent. And it was because of that the African Union, actually in its wisdom, the heads of state decided to adopt a dedicated instrument to combat the menace of violence against women within the continent and to address the challenges that we are confronted with. Within that context also, when we talk about violence against women, we have emerging issues dealing with digital violence against women. Femicide is on the rise. We also have the cultural practices that inhibit women's full participation in society, female genital mutilation, child marriage, forced marriages, early marriages, a vast array of challenges that we're confronted within the continent. But having said that, it's not all gloom and doom. We have pockets, it's a mixed bag. We have pockets of successes here and there because we've been fighting for women's leadership for a very long time. And we are seeing women now taking the leadership mantle. We celebrated recently Namibia for the historic election of the Honorable Excellency as the President of Namibia, and her bold steps in ensuring that her country actually reflects the country in terms of men and women with gender balance, ensuring that the parliament at the highest level, within the judiciary, we have parity. So this is something that we celebrate. But while we celebrate, we want to have a critical mass because it's not enough that out of a continent of 55, we're talking about one. We would like to see more women in leadership. And this is why we continue our advocacy, our campaign within the context of the very revolutionary instrument that we had adopted before the AU Convention, which is a Maputo Protocol, which is a very innovative, revolutionary instrument that calls for the full ensuring that women are fully incorporated in development processes, ensuring that we prohibit all forms of discrimination against women, we prohibit all forms of violence against women.
So how significant then is the signing of this Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls at the AU Mid-Year Summit?
The AU Mid-Year Summit was held in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. And as you may be aware, the convention itself was adopted in February during the 38th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of States in Addis Ababa. And since its adoption in February, we've had now 6 signatures. The first signatory was Djibouti, that took place in Addis Ababa. But on the margins of the Mid-Year Summit in Malabo, through advocacy and through the resolve of my mechanism as the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women and the AU Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, and concerted effort of women's rights organization, we were able to actually get 5 more signatories on the margins of the summit, which is quite actually significant. We would have loved to have more, but we're happy that we're able to actually generate 5 signatories. These signatures are very significant because by signing the convention, states are signaling their commitment and willingness to be bound by it. They're not bound by it, but when you sign a convention, actually you are actually saying to the whole world, to the continent, that you will not take any steps that will contradict the convention. But we will move it, we'd like to move it to ratification because the instrument itself actually spells out how it enters into force, and it requires 50 ratification.
Can you briefly explain how this convention differs from other frameworks and declarations before on gender-based violence across Africa?
Very interesting question. I think it may be significant to reiterate from the onset that the convention does not stand on its own. The convention builds on existing declarations that are there of global interest to women's rights. It's the CEDAW Convention, which is the International Bill of Rights for Women globally. And then, as I mentioned initially, we have the Maputo Protocol, the convention, which is actually the Bill of Rights for women within the continent. The Maputo Protocol, as it is, has been lauded globally as one of the most revolutionary, transformative, and innovative instruments when it comes to women's rights. In these very relevant articles, it prohibits violence against women in all its forms, in general terms, and specifically also talks about specific issues related to child marriage. And for the very first time, we have an instrument that recognizing female genital mutilation as a form of violence against women, which is quite very revolutionary. We don't have that in any other instrument. So what the convention does is that it provides us with the first legally binding framework with robust provisions dealing with prevention, dealing with protection, and punitive measures when violence against women occurs in any context. Because violence against women is one of the most persistent and devastating human rights violations in Africa, across the continent. And actually, violence against women is being used as tactics of war nowadays. So this is a matter of global and actually continent-wide interest. And we're really very happy that this framework actually is specifically dedicated. Also, it actually deals with emerging forms of violence against women, digital violence against women, violence in the cyberspace. It talks about femicides, which is a rising concern in the continent. So specifically deals with that and provides the general principles, the guidelines, state responsibility. What will states need to put in place to curb the menace of violence against women? What are the principles that should guide states when actually they deal with issues related to violence against women in terms of prevention, protection, and also the survivor-centered approach that actually it builds into in a legally binding framework. These are things that at the level of the African Commission, we've elaborated on in our soft laws, in our jurisprudence, by having general comments and guidelines. But this time around, we have a legally binding instrument that actually obligates states to uphold these principles as they deal with the issue of violence against women and girls in the continent.
I think you've pretty much given me some a bit of an answer in terms of my next question, because you did mention it. There are some quite comprehensive and unique highlights in some of the provisions that are in this document. And I wonder if you could take us through that. I mean, you've mentioned cyberspace as one of them. And again, that's something that's fairly modern and probably not well understood as violence.
Yeah, I think the issue of digital violence or technology-facilitated violence is an emerging issue. But even though it's an emerging issue, I think it is well known the challenges that women face in the digital sphere. Women politicians are subjected to harassment and intimidation. Girls and young women are also subjected to harassment and intimidation. I mean, violence that takes place offline is now manifesting itself at an exacerbated state online. And the digital space actually offers sort of a barrier and emboldens people who are actually perpetrators, even worse than when, the violence that occurs offline. So this is quite a challenge. And it is really very heartening that this is an area that is actually extensively covered in the convention. At the level of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which has been given the mandate to monitor the implementation and accountability mechanism for the convention, we've actually recognized the issue of violence against women. And we had actually adopted a resolution to study the dynamics of violence against women within the continent and to offer a comprehensive study that will actually offer guidelines to the states as to how to address this menace. So what we have in the convention actually builds on what we had already focused our attention on. And we're hoping that once that study is fully realized, with consultations and participation by the continent, member states, civil society organizations, and all relevant stakeholders, it will actually reinforce the commitments that are enshrined in the convention relating to violence against women in the digital space.
It speaks quite a bit to a victim-centered approach and the need for positive masculinity. I am curious, though, how do these principles translate into practical, enforceable actions by member states?
Yes, having a survivor-centered approach is very crucial to address the issue of violence against women, because women who experience violence are confronted with so many challenges. So as we work towards punitive measures, we must also look into the status and the mental health and the status of women who are subjected to violence. So the survivor-centered approach actually ensures a very comprehensive and integrated approach to solving the problem of violence against women, looking at the root causes, finding the ways and means of ensuring that women who are victims and survivors of violence are able to be well integrated back into their societies, that are accepted back into their society and not being ostracized. The challenge we have within the continent is that despite the fact that violence against women, as the president of South Africa said, has reached pandemic level, we find that the culture of silence that we have within the continent, our socio-cultural context does not allow women to speak out. So having a survivor-centered approach will embolden women, will ensure that they can speak out and claim their right without any backlash. This is very important, and this is why the convention expressly provides for institutions, structures, laws, and facilities that need to be put in place to ensure that survivors actually, their needs actually well addressed and taken care of. On the issue of positive masculinity, recognizes the fact that in society we have both men and women, boys and girls. And the work we do, we cannot do in isolation. We cannot keep talking to women because the perpetrators are men and boys. So how do we ensure that we actually use those voices, those spaces, to ensure that together, as a collective responsibility, we're able to work to address the menace of violence against women? How do we ensure that we're able to use champions by whatever name, whether you want to call it positive masculinity, a he for she, or well-intentioned, well-meaning men and boys, to use them as agents of change as we work towards addressing this menace of violence against women.
That was Honourable Janet Ramatuli Sala Njai, the African Union's Special Rapporteur on Rights of Women in Africa and Commissioner at the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights. 6:58 Central African Time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us for this, the second hour of the program. I'm Peter Ndoro.
My name is Asanda Beda. Thank you for staying with Channel Africa. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle across our various social media networks. To get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. Comments and questions are always welcome. In this hour, we look at Kenyan human rights activist Boniface Mwangi facing serious charges of facilitating terrorist acts. We'll be speaking to someone from the Kenya Human Rights Commission to help unpack what's going on there. And also, global health leaders, policymakers and advocates will gather in Maputo from the 22nd to the 24th of July. This for the 2025 Innovation and Action for Immunization and Child Survival Forum there in Mozambique. Those stories and more coming up in this hour of Rise and Shine. Let's get our news first. Here's Jolani Tulomwepe, and then Figile Lingwati will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Kenyan police have arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi and plan to arraign him today on suspicion of facilitating terrorist attacks linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations, or DCI, said on X that detectives had arrested Mwangi at his home in Machakos County at the weekend and had seized 2 unused tear gas canisters and 1 7.62mm blank round, along with 2 mobile phones, a laptop and notebooks. In addition, Mwangi is also due to be arraigned for unlawful possession of ammunition. There's tension in the country as hundreds of Kenyans took to the streets last month following the death in police custody of political blogger Albert Ojwang. South Africa's Chief Justice Mandi Samaya has issued directions in former President Jacob Zuma and the Umkhonto weSizwe Party's legal challenge against President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to place Police Minister Senzo Mchunu on special leave. This after Zuma and the MK Party filed papers in the Apex Court to challenge the said decision, as well as the decision to appoint Professor Firoz Kachalia as acting Police Minister and the establishment of a Judicial Commission of inquiry. The said directions set a number of deadlines for interested parties, namely that those who wish to oppose the application must file their answering affidavits on or before Tuesday the 22nd of July 2025. In addition, any interested parties that wish to intervene in support of the main application must file their intervention applications on or before the end of the day. The South African police have launched an investigation into the deadly collapse of a Western Cape building. This follows a damning report by the Council for the Built Environment, which highlighted multiple failures, including the use of substandard materials, structural cracks and visible gaps. 34 construction workers were killed and 28 others injured when the multi-storey building collapsed in May last year. Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Dean McPherson says the collapse was preventable.
The geotechnical study of the site, critical in determining soil stability and groundwater conditions, was not only incomplete, but it was grossly deficient. Key tests and geological mappings were missing. The health and safety agent appointed to monitor site compliance resigned midway through the project, stating clearly that they could no longer ensure safe working conditions. But this was not reported, and if it had been, the site would have been closed.
South Africa's Department of Health says it is embarking on a massive campaign to encourage members of the public to donate body organs and tissues in a bid to save lives. The department says there's reluctancy to donate organs due to cultural and religious stereotypes. Department spokesperson Foster Mohale says members of society can donate organs while still alive or issue instructions to have their organs donated after they've passed away. Mohale says there are more than 2 2,000 patients awaiting organ and tissue donors across the country.
Definitely, there are about over 2,500 people who are on the active waiting list to receive either organ or tissue in South Africa. So this is the only list that we know. So we've realized that because of lack of knowledge, but because of cultural or religious barriers, which we believe that as the department working with our partner organizations like Organ Donor Foundation and other organizations, we can be able to change people's perceptions around the issue of organ and tissue donation and save lives.
Officials in Germany and Iran say fresh talks are expected to take place next week on Tehran's nuclear program. Iran has consistently denied that its nuclear facilities, which were targeted by Israel and Israeli strikes last month, had been used to develop nuclear weapons. The BBC's Liz Doucette has the story.
A deadline is looming for Iran. European ministers are warning if there is no progress on a nuclear deal by the end of August, they will have no choice but to reimpose the punishing sanctions they had lifted as part of the 2015 nuclear agreement. European diplomatic sources say they may be ready to extend that deadline to allow more time for talks, but they say they're still discussing when and where to meet. Iran is also under pressure to return to bilateral negotiations with the US.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Scotty Scheffler lives out childhood dream with Open Championship win at Portrush. And the Proteas defeat Zimbabwe to secure the final spot in the T20 International Tri-Series. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Kenyan human rights activist Boniface Mwangi is facing serious charges of facilitating terrorist acts, a move that has sparked national and international outrage. His arrest follows last month's anti-government protests, during which at least 19 people were killed. Rights groups have slammed the charges as politically motivated and a threat to civil liberties. To help us unpack the legal and human rights implications, we're joined now by Ernest Cornell from the Kenya Human Rights Commission, or the KHRC. Ernest, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Monday?
I'm okay, Asanda. How are you in South Africa?
We're well, thank you very much, and thanks for making time for this chat. What's your immediate reaction to Boniface Mwangi's arrest and the terrorism charges that he's been facing? It's been an ongoing case.
Well, this is an escalation of state intimidation on human rights defenders and people who dare to stand against their impunity. You will notice that there's been a trend for those who took part in June 25th protest, or those who took part in the Sabasaba protest, or anyone who attempts to challenge the government. Now, there are being charges of terrorism are being preferred against them. You'll notice that this is a deliberate scheme to scare off anyone who would like to confront the state, because charges of terrorism carry stiffer penalties, have very, very stringent bond and bail terms.
Do you believe these charges have any legal or factual standing?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. These charges are going to fail. Are going to fail because they are trumped up charges.
There are questions about the legality of the search and arrest that was implemented on Boniface Mwangi. Was due process followed there?
Well, the purported search warrant that we've seen does not bear the name of the magistrate who issued it. That's number one. The second thing is the search warrant was specific on where to be effected, and it was Mageuzi Hub, Boniface Mwangi's office. But officers from the Directorate of Criminal Investigation extended this search, their lawful search, into his private home.
What are you expecting in terms of his appearance in court today? Mwangi is expected to appear today. What are your expectations? What are your concerns as that unfolds?
So there's a specific court in which people accused falsely or otherwise of terror-related charges are taken to. That's Kahawa law courts. So we expect that Boniface Mwangi will be arraigned there today, and Kenyans of goodwill, human rights defenders, and others will be in court in solidarity with him. We expect, of course, the director of public prosecution to see through the scheme that the government is employing, to see through it that these are malicious charges. These are charges that won't stand any test of law, and these are charges that cannot be prosecuted. And therefore, we expect that the DPP will have this case dropped immediately.
Any concerns about those who want to show in court in solidarity and support of Mwangi, and what challenges they could face?
Well, one of the challenges they could face is restriction to court access. When other human rights defenders who are arrested in relation to June 25th and Sabasaba, when they were arrested and other human rights defenders wanted to be in solidarity with them in court, there were there are strict restrictions on who can access the court. People were coming with Kenyan flags. People were coming with banners of supportive messages. But orderlies and police who are manning entrance to the courtrooms could not allow them to access the premises with a flag or with any banner with supportive messages. We anticipate this is the kind of restriction that people will be facing today. But let me mention this, Asanda, is that Boniface Mwangi's arrest and pending arraignment in court today precedes a court that he and Agatha Taure of Uganda, a journalist and lawyer from Uganda, were detained in Tanzania, abducted, and forcibly disappeared when they had gone to the country to be in solidarity with Tundu Lissu, who is also facing other trumped-up charges. They were held in Communicado for several days, tortured, and later released in their respective countries. We feel there's a connection between what has been happening from June 25th, or from May when they went to Tanzania to stand in solidarity with Tundu Lissu, to what came to happen in June 25th and Sabasaba. Remember, this case that the two filed, plus other organizations, including the Kenya Human Rights Commission, is putting on the spot the regimes of Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania for allowing cross-border repression, for allowing human rights violations, and for collaborating in these abuses.
Let's talk about that then, as the Kenya Human Rights Commission, or the KHRC, and your involvement in the case. Will you do anything legally, or it will be through monitoring at this stage?
So for on the case against the three states, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, we are among the co-petitioners. Boniface and Ataure are the lead petitioners, but we are also among the co-petitioners amongst other organizations. For this case in which Boniface Mwangi is facing trumped-up charges, we'll be in court in solidarity with him, and we'll pursue any legal avenue to make sure that the charges are dropped and he has his freedom back.
What's your message, lastly, to Kenyans who are concerned about their freedoms right now, who may want to speak up but feel that maybe they can't? What would you say to them, Ernest?
This is not the time to retreat. This is the time to double down and push back against these abuses. If today they are coming for Boniface Mwangi and you're not talking, tomorrow they'll come for you and there'll be no one to defend you. So you need to stand up and reclaim your rights.
Right. Ernest, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for giving us and shedding light on this topic.
Thank you, Asanda.
A pleasure. Ernest Cornell is from the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, or the KHRC, sharing insights on the arrest of Boniface Mwangi and what it means for civil liberties in Kenya. At 13 minutes past 7, stay with us.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
Mwadzuka bwanji nonse zukani the Shy Guy a Morning Switch.
Have you ever listened to a song and then it gives you goosebumps? Cause it takes you way back in the 80s. My goodness. Yay. Woo. Hey baby. You hear Yvonne Chaka Chaka there. I wanna talk to the DJ. And then the DJ goes like, hey baby, I've got you on the other side. Huh? There were no WhatsApps then, right? There were no sliding in the TMs at the time. Oh man.
Your weekend mornings are activated with the Shy Guy on the Morning Switch, bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
A confidential UN report that has cast a fresh spotlight on the simmering tensions in the eastern DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. The leaked findings accuse Uganda of significantly expanding its military footprint in the region without the consent of Kinshasa. Now, the report also alleges that Ugandan forces may be providing de facto buffer zone for M23 rebel group, an accusation that, if confirmed, could deepen mistrust in a region already grappling with overlapping insurgencies and strained diplomatic ties. Now, these revelations come as both Uganda and Rwanda continue to deny backing M23, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. To unpack Uganda's position and the broader regional implications, we're now joined by Msunguzi Blanchet, who's Al Jazeera's journalist based in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's begin with Uganda's response. What has the government said officially in reaction to this leaked UN report accusing Uganda of increasing troop numbers in eastern DRC without Kinshasa's approval?
Thank you and good morning, Peter. So Uganda's response has not been official, but it has been dismissive. The Ugandan government has dismissed the report, saying the content of the report is not true. But also we need to know that Uganda is used to these reports. The UN panel of experts group has existed for almost 2 decades, and whenever they write a report about Eastern DRC, you'll find there a paragraph or two, or more than 2 paragraphs that speaks the role of Uganda in the conflict in Eastern DRC. And Uganda has always been dismissing those reports, and many of those reports have not come to have big implications for the regime in Kampala, which is why they are always confident of, these reports are not going to have an impact on us.
So Uganda has in the past taken a position that its troops on that side of the country are about fighting the Allied Democratic Forces, the ADF, a group that Kampala labels as a terror threat. Is this something that they continue to put out as a reason for troops in their numbers on that side of the country?
Yes, that is Uganda's official response whenever you ask them, what are you doing in Congo? They tell you, we are fighting ADF. But at the beginning towards the end of 2024 and at the beginning of 2025, we saw the expansion of the increase in the number of troops, but also the expansion of the area of coverage where these troops were. The ADF rebels in Eastern Congo their bases were in North Kivu, and then when they were bombed in 2021, they dispersed into some very small groups and moved far into North Kivu. So the areas where they moved into in North Kivu are known. But we saw that Uganda's troops were expanding into the other areas where there is no ADF where there are no activities of ADF, where there is no reported incidents of ADF. And we saw that the Ugandan army ended up crashing with local militias, like there is a militia group called Codeco. It killed a Ugandan senior officer at the rank of a colonel. And then after that, we saw that the head of that Codeco group came to Uganda and met the commander of Uganda's army, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the son of the president. So it was some sort of a ceasefire between those two groups. So, and we have seen Uganda continue to expand in Ituri, in areas where there is no ADF. And the question has been, why is Uganda getting into many other areas if it went into Eastern DRC to fight ADF? And it's now in areas where there is no ADF.
Could there be economic motivations for Uganda's activity along that border? DRC, as we know, is resource rich, and economic interests have motivated other countries, we believe, in increasing military presence in the DRC. Could Uganda be interested in the minerals on the ground?
The answer is yes. Let's talk about minerals first. It's that Uganda has become the main export hub for gold in the region, and Uganda exports gold worth $2 billion every year. And when you look at Uganda, it doesn't have those large gold deposits. So much of this gold comes from Eastern Congo. Then there are other products like timber. A lot of hardwood comes from Eastern Congo. It gets into Uganda. It goes to Kenya. It goes to other countries. Ends up in Asia. So Uganda is an important route for those products, those minerals. But also look at it from the other perspective that there are no industries in Eastern Congo. So Congo depends on products that comes from Uganda. And so one of them, there was a discussion, I think, 2 years ago about taxing this gold that comes into Uganda. So it was a high-level discussion that reached at the president's desk, and the president was involved. And one of the people who were in these discussions told me the argument that which was on the ground, which people were putting up against taxing gold was that, you see, the Congolese who bring gold into Uganda, they go back with trucks loaded with products made in Uganda. And Uganda exports to DRC are worth like $700 million. Those are the official statistics. When you add in the informal trade, which is not registered, it's more than $1 billion. So wow. The Congolese in Eastern Congo who see that there is no government presence, they also want the Ugandan army to stay and protect them, those with business interests. And Uganda sees that legitimate economic interest beyond the exploitation of minerals. The other interesting bit is that actually when Uganda's army entered Eastern DRC in November of 2021, they were not just with guns. They are accompanied by road construction equipment. Uganda is supposed to construct roads in Eastern Congo that will ease movement of its goods. So, and the government of Uganda is footing more than half of this bill. So you see the economic interest which they see there.
Right.
And they have to, in one way or another, protect this interest.
Msunguzi, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very, very much indeed for your insights on this developing story. Thanks for your time.
A pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Msunguzi Blanchet, Al Jazeera journalist based in Kampala.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet.
Channel 802.
At 23 minutes past 7 Central African time, let's talk about global health leaders, policy makers and advocates who will gather in Maputo from the 22nd to 24 July. This for the 2025 Innovation and Action for Immunization and Child Survival Forum. The high-level event, hosted by the governments of Mozambique and Sierra Leone, aims to boost access to life-saving vaccines and end preventable child deaths in sub-Saharan Africa. Key partners include the government of Spain, the La Caixa Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and UNICEF. Joining us now to talk about the forum is Maiki Arts, who is UNICEF's Chief of Child Health and Nutrition. Maiki, thank you for joining us. How are you? Maiki, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for making time for us this morning. Can you hear me?
Nice to be here with you.
Okay, great. Maiki, we appreciate your time, but what are the key goals? Let's start there in terms of the Immunization and Child Survival Forum. And why is it significant for sub-Saharan Africa at this particular time?
Yes, thank you very much. So this week we're seeing governments from around 20 countries that are coming together in Maputo to discuss how to accelerate the progress in reducing child mortality. And the reason why we're doing this now is that we are only 5 years away from 2030 when we want to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And there has been a lot of progress in reducing deaths and particularly preventable deaths in newborns and children under 5 years of age. But still today, and every day, there are 13,000 children who die before they reach their 5th birthday. And 60% of them, so almost 8,000, live in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, we know what we need to do to prevent those deaths and also to treat most of the diseases that children die of. But we're not doing enough yet to make sure that every child receives those preventive measures and receives the treatment in time. And we all feel that every child has the right to reach their 5th birthday and to thrive beyond that into adulthood. So country leaders are coming together this week, together with health leaders, with researchers and other partners to look at the latest evidence, share experiences and learn from each other, and then make concrete commitments on how to further reduce child mortality in the coming years.
So progress has been made, but as you highlight, there are challenges. 13,000 children under the age of 5, or 13,000 children don't make it until the age of 5 and they die before that. Can you highlight some of the most pressing challenges currently hindering access to immunization and child health services across sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes, so we're basically, I can mention 3 key issues. One is that there are huge inequities in countries. We see that children from low-income households and rural areas, they face higher risk of death before they're 5 years old. Also children who are born to mothers with low education levels. So there is no what we call the universal coverage of health services yet. And we need to improve that, particularly for those most vulnerable populations. Then number 2, the health systems in countries are not always set up in the most efficient way and sustainable way. Sometimes you have programs that run in a very vertical mode. Sometimes there is not enough emphasis in work in the community. So there is still room to improve the health systems. And then at this very moment, we are seeing a funding crisis in the health sector due to reductions in foreign aid. And that is particularly affecting countries that depend on this aid for their health expenditures. So it is important to strengthen that funding, and particularly when we know, for example, that every dollar that we invest in immunization brings $55 in return. And every dollar that we invest in nutrition brings $23 in return. So we know that there are solutions out there, and that we just need to apply them in an equitable way.
UNICEF is a core partner in this forum, as we mentioned earlier. What specific role will the organization play during this 3-day event?
So we've been supporting the organization of this event. We work in 119 countries across the globe, and also in these around 20 countries that are participating this week. We've been supporting these countries for years, and will also continue to support them when they go home and are going to act on their commitment. So we work on action specifically in this area for child survival and development. We support the design, for example, of relevant programs from the community level upwards, programs that aim to reach every child. We work to strengthen the capacity of frontline workers. We support innovation, including digitalization, but also different other innovations. And also what we call the last mile delivery, making sure that all the relevant supplies and items reach every household that needs it.
You mentioned digital innovations there. What can you tell us in terms of more innovations that are being launched at this forum and how those could significantly impact child survival rates moving forward?
Right. So there are different innovations that have been out there. For example, we have new vaccines now. Vaccines, for example, against malaria, against certain types of pneumonia. There are new tools to diagnose people with specific diseases that you can also use now in the community. There are medicines that are more and more made in a certain way that they're easy for children to take up. In the digital area, there's a lot of still room for improvement also with how community workers can use it, how it can be used to work with families. We're also looking at innovations, for example, in terms of funding. We're now talking about debt swaps and other innovative ways to get funding for the health sector. And then also, strengthening, learning from each other. Many countries have very good practices, have very good learned how they can work with community health workers, how they reach children, how to reach the last mile. And we want countries to learn from one another.
Mikey, thank you so much for your time again and giving us insight into this very important topic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Maiki Arts is UNICEF's Chief of Child Health and Nutrition, talking to us on the line about the 2025 Innovation and Action for Immunization and Child Survival Forum that's taking place this week in Mozambique, Maputo. 30 minutes past 7 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Dwelane Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines. Kenyan police have arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi and plan to arraign him today on suspicion of facilitating terrorist act linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. South Africa's Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister David Mahlobo has assured the public that the levels of water contamination by antiretroviral drugs in South Africa's water sources will not affect the standard of drinking water. And finally, the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says an Israeli military evacuation order for central Gaza has dealt another devastating blow to efforts to keep people alive in the war-ravaged territory. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's find out what's been happening in the world of sport. And the pride of Africa. So many teams doing well. Let's find out what's been happening with Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Yes, Peter, this hour we begin with the cricket news. It's happening just across the border. The Proteas advanced to the final of the T20 International Tri-Series in Harare with a 7-wicket victory over host Zimbabwe on Sunday, a result that also eliminated Zimbabwe from contention. Debutant Ruben Herman struck a 36-ball 63, his maiden T20 International half-century, while Rassie van der Dussen remained unbeaten on 52 as South Africa chased down Zimbabwe's total of 144 for 6 with 16 balls to spare. The win ensured both South Africa and New Zealand a place in the final, with Zimbabwe winless after 3 matches. Herman says the new ball was hard to face.
So I think one thing we identified is the new ball is quite tough on these wickets because there is a bit of invariable bounce and invariable pace. So the new ball is probably the toughest time to bat. So I think, and then after that, Zim also did well to come back after losing a couple of early wickets. But then I think probably the difference lied in, I think we were just maybe just more ruthless in the batting department with bad balls. We were good at running twos as well. So I think the batsmanship was good from our part because we ran a lot of twos within our boundaries as well. So I think probably that's where the difference lies. Is we just were a bit more ruthless in the way we scored maybe.
Now on to rugby news. Captain of South Africa's World Under-20 Rugby Champions, Riley Norton, says the country has the most talent of all nations at schoolboy level, which will make it tough to stop the Springboks' current momentum. The Junior Boks beat New Zealand 23-15 in the final of the World Championship in Rovigo in Italy to end a 13-year drought in the tournament. South African teams now hold the men's world crowns at the under-20 and senior level, as well as in the sevens format. The skills and talent in local rugby is undeniable, and Captain Riley Norton says in the final, mental maturity was also on display.
When you're in the lead, it can cross your mind that I try to straight away get back to what's at hand. And I think everyone was reminding us that we can never be complacent, especially against a team like New Zealand, which are unbelievable. As soon as you switch off and you give them an opportunity, they can take it, and they're deadly in that. So, of course, it crosses your mind, but at the end of the day, you've got to stay in the present, and you just got to focus from the play to the play and whistle to whistle, because I think if you just think about the future and what's to come, I think that's when you can get yourself in quite a tricky situation and see yourself conceding points.
The foundation for Springbok rugby is in place and strong, according to the under-20 coach, Kevin Foote.
Once you put these guys in the environment and the environment's right for them, they'll flourish. Riley's a point in case. Riley finished school last year. He plays in the tight five and he now captains us. He's still going to be here next year, but I do believe that this is such a talented group, and in the right environment, they'll kick on. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of these names going forward for South African rugby, and especially in the URC.
And we end with the Kenyan young star, Clinton Aluvi, led the way at the Africa Under-18 and Under-20 Championships in Nigeria with victory in the men's 100 meters. Aluvi cut the tape in 10.42 seconds to win gold in the Under-20 category, as Botswana's Letebele Karabo claimed silver by clocking 10.54 seconds. Nigeria's John Caleb bagged bronze after finishing third in 10.61 seconds. There was more delight for Kenya as Lawi Ngetich grabbed gold in the boys under-18 1,500 meter final, timing 3 minutes 45.67 seconds to win the race. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Beda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business now. Here is Nosipo Zuma with the news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, aviation expert Guy Leach says the aviation industry has not fully recovered since COVID-19. He says FlySafair is a low-cost carrier and always attempts to keep its cost down as far as possible. This comes as more than 200 FlySafair pilots affiliated to Workers' Union Solidarity are set to embark on a 2-week strike from today. Solidarity says they've given the employer notice to strike following a deadlock in wage negotiations. The union has rejected the airline's proposed 5.7% salary increase. Leach says FlySafair is faced with a lot of challenges and that might take time to resolve.
But I mean, I think that what's aggravating the situation right now is certainly these claims by Solidarity that the two senior executives, the CEO and the CFO of the airline, are pocketing as much as 90 million rand in terms of shares that they're selling. And it's obviously very worrying that they're selling shares. It's never a good sign when senior management starts selling off shares. But then the airline's got its other problems, as we know. It's got this whole problem of its foreign ownership limitations, which it fell foul of the Air Services Licensing Council at the end of last year. That one has still not properly been solved or landed, if you like.
FlySafair management says it has put contingency measures in place to keep its operation undisrupted. This says more than 200 pilots are set to go on strike from today. Trade Union Solidarity says it has obtained a strike notice for 14 days as the pilot rejected the 5.7% wage increase offer from the employer. FlySafair's Chief Marketing Officer, Kirby Garden.
We've got contingency plans in place. It's obviously regrettable that we have to get to a situation where we need to take this type of drastic action. Of course, every employer would seek to not be in this position. We have approached it really responsibly, and so our aim is will ensure that all flights depart on time and as scheduled, and that has already been something that has been confirmed. So from a passenger perspective, we thank them for their patience, but also want to reassure them that their flights would be there. For the teams that are working and for the teams that are back at the office, obviously we have extended gratitude. This is they've been very busy in terms of managing these recourses.
South African e-commerce company Takealot Group is ramping up on demand delivery by repurposing its Mr. D takeaway food platform to handle pet supplies, toys and other high-frequency purchase items in a bid to fend off growing competition. Mr. D, which before the COVID-19 pandemic focused on doorstep food delivery, has been repositioning itself as a broader convenience market, a strategy born out of desperation 5 years ago when restaurant operations were restricted. Its chief executive says he is betting big on Mr. D to lead its next phase of growth as consumers demand more immediacy and convenience. Ghana's central bank says that an emergency meeting of its Monetary Policy Committee MPC held last week had considered whether to take immediate action, but held off until a regular meeting later this month. In a statement, the bank has noted that a broad range of macroeconomic indicators had improved as the West African country emerges from its most severe economic crisis in decades. The bank says inflation expectations are broadly anchored, eternal buffers have strengthened, and confidence in the economy is returning. And finally, oil prices are little unchanged as traders assess the impact of new European sanctions on Russian oil supply, while they also worry about tariffs possibly weakening fuel demand as Middle East producers are raising output. Brent crude futures fall $1 to $69.27 a barrel after settling 0.35% lower on Friday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $67.44 a barrel, up 10 cents, following a 0.30% decline in the previous session. Your financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,530 naira, and Botswana is 13 pula 30. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 71, and in Zambia is 23 kwacha 08. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rule 579. Russia is 78 rubles 44, India is 86 rupees 14, China at 7 yuan 17, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 68. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,354 and platinum at $1,427 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $69.37 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipo Suma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Start your day informed, inspired,
and entertain. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun, a five-part documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
The World Bank and the Mozambican government have pledged to invest in generating an additional 15,000 megawatts of electricity for the region. Now, this announcement comes as energy producer Cahora Bassa revealed during a media tour in the Tete province that it's facing serious challenges, chief among them aging equipment and outdated infrastructure, which continue to hinder efficient power supply. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Samosa is in Mozambique and has more on this developing story.
At the heart of Tete province lies the Cahora Bassa hydro power plant, a 50-year-old symbol of Mozambique's energy ambitions. But behind the towering turbines and transmission lines is a system under strain. Company officials says decades-old equipment and aging infrastructure are making it harder to meet the rising energy demands of the country and its neighbors. World Bank Group President Ayabanga just concluded his visit to Mozambique. President Daniel Chapo says his visit marks a significant moment in Mozambique's efforts to boost its economic development within the region.
As I very well said to the president of the World Bank and other partners of the World Bank Group who can come and invest in this whole energy grid that we are talking about, producing energy through hydroelectric power stations, solar power stations, gas power stations, and also wind power stations.
Mozambique's largest power producer, Cahora Bassa, says it urgently needs investment to address major challenges facing the region's energy sector. President Ayabanga underscored Mozambique's energy potential.
He has a few priorities which we share. One of those is energy, and he is very keen to use the assets of Mozambique, which is hydroelectric, natural gas, solar, sun, wind. You've got everything in this country to create the right kind of capability for energy and transmission. And frankly, in this part of Africa, nobody has the capacity or capability to do what can be done with the assets of this country. So I think this is a real opportunity to not only see and understand what has been done 50 years ago, which now can be the basis of the next set of investments. We are discussing with the government of Mozambique the idea of investing in another 1,500 megawatts downstream from here, a cascade project. And then in the meantime, we're also doing some investing in solar capacity, 400 megawatts. And then he has some master plans, which I think are even more interesting in terms of adding more capacity in this plant and renovating this plant and then adding further downstream. So if you look at a 10-year picture of this president's thinking, which I share, it is to make Mozambique an energy powerhouse.
Meanwhile, Carlos Yam, CEO of Pandakua, says an estimated $1.4 billion would go a long way in helping the company reach new heights and expand its impact in the energy sector.
The entirety of this project, if we include the financial and labor aspect, will be well above $1.4 billion. It is very important for us to analyze not only the documentation, but ideological issues and also infrastructural issues.
With regional energy needs growing and infrastructure aging fast, Cahora Bassa's call for investment could be a game changer, not just for Mozambique, but for the entire region. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Songo, Mozambique.
Efforts aimed at bolstering peace and security initiatives in Africa were under the spotlight at a high-level joint consultative meeting between the Peace and Security Council, or the PSC, of the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament, or the PAP, in Johannesburg, South Africa. The meeting sought to strengthen and foster renewed collaboration between the two AU organs. Tlantla Mahlangu reports.
A landmark joint consultative meeting between the Pan-African Parliament and the African Union's Peace and Security Council concluded on Friday in Midrand, Johannesburg, signaling a new chapter for peace and security on the continent. The two-day session, attended by PEP members and ambassadors from across the African Union, produced concrete resolutions aimed at bolstering peace and security initiatives in Africa. PEP President Chief Fortune Charumbira says the engagement marked a new era of working relations between the Pan-African Parliament and the African Union Peace and Security Council, which are all crucial organs of the African Union.
I think the lessons that we have learned, one is that organs can work together within the AU, that we have to make an effort to eliminate silos. And that's what we've achieved, eliminate silos. And also that one of the take-homes, Article 18 of the protocol relating to the establishment of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, compels the PSC to maintain close working relationship with the Pan-African Parliament in furtherance of peace, security, and stability in Africa. Take that home. We should not forget. In similar, I can read the PAP one. The PAP one also does the same. So we are compelled by the protocol. It's not a choice.
Discussions during the meeting are said to have covered issues such as the importance of inclusive political participation, the deployment of parliamentary diplomacy in conflict resolutions, and the active involvement of women and youth in peace-building processes, amongst others. African Union's Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Ambassador Bankole Adeyoye, says the meeting was successful.
From contextualizing the state of peace and security in Africa to inclusive political participation and representation, parliamentary voice in the area of global governance reform, and most importantly, the working methods. These processes have really come a long way. We want to reinforce, re-engage on democracy, but we also want to encourage good governance. As has been stated, it is the year of justice. Justice for all Africans and people of African descent through reparations. But the reparations we are talking of is not just financial, it is about state building. We can build our states, capable states, so that we can have a better voice in the global system. I will always remain an advocate of the Pan-African Parliament.
The chairperson of the PSC for July 2025, Rebecca Amuge Otengo, says the meeting presented a significant step forward in collective effort to achieve lasting peace and stability, demonstrating a strong commitment to work together towards a more secure and prosperous Africa.
I would just like to say that sitting together made me believe that the inclusive political leadership, diplomacy and technical expertise can move this continent further than we think within the framework of AU Agenda 2063. We'd also like to assure you that PSC, PRC, PAPS and other AU organs are one family and also close allies because we work for the same objective.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Tlantla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Now, South Africa's ANC, that's the African National Congress's Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, says that the recognition of Morocco by MK party leader Jacob Zuma does not come as a surprise. Mbalula says that the ANC will not change its stance of supporting the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. The former ANC president and now leader of the Umkhonto weSizwe MK party, Jacob Zuma, was seen in photos on social media visiting Morocco with the South African flag behind him. Nhlanhla Kgatlana has more.
The ANC has been throughout the years consistent in its unwavering support for the people of Western Sahara. Morocco still considers Western Sahara to be part of its territory, despite the stance receiving widespread condemnation from many African countries and the African Union. In 2007, at the ANC's elective conference in Polokwane, which saw Jacob Zuma emerge as a winner to lead the party, a foreign policy position was adopted in support of the struggle in Western Sahara. This policy position was again reaffirmed when he was voted for a second term in Bloemfontein.
We reaffirm support for the people of Western Sahara in their struggle for self-determination.
Throughout the years, the ANC's position on Western Sahara has been consistent, and this was always evident during its January 8 celebrations. And Zuma, as the head of state and the party back then, reaffirmed this position. Now a U-turn from Zuma. This time around, the leader of Umkhonto weSizwe party, the third largest party in the country, hold a different position.
We call on the international community to support Morocco's autonomy plan as the possible effective way to ensure peace, stability, and prosperity for the people of Western Sahara. Our party, Umkhonto weSizwe, recognizes the historical and legal context that underpins Morocco's claim to Western Sahara.
Glaring in the background, the South African flag, the ANC has strongly condemned the expelled former president for siding with Morocco at the expense of the struggle of the people of Western Sahara. The ANC further says it's not surprised by Zuma's stance and has deemed it a sellout position.
The recognition of Morocco by Jacob Zuma is not a surprise. Jacob Zuma represents everything that is wrong. That is pursued by sellout, and that's what it is. We as the ANC, we will fight side by side for the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. We are in solidarity with them, and Morocco must stop the occupation of Western Sahara. Zuma is no messiah. He's a sellout of note. For whatever reason that he's doing all of this, it's no surprise to us.
Political analyst Dr. Levi Ndoro says this is not shocking.
Jacob Zuma's stance on Morocco could also be a strategy for him and his party to get support from the Moroccan state and also to create relations with the Moroccan state, and also for the MKP to become a factor in African politics. And of course, this behavior has a potential to spark a lot of discussions and debates, and that will make the MKP to be relevant.
Meanwhile, the ANC will this week hold the Liberation Movement Summit, and the issue of Western Sahara and Morocco is likely to be discussed. Nhlanhla Kgatlana, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right. One of my favorite features that we do on the program as often as we can is to go back in time, to go back in history on some of the key events that took place across the continent and sometimes the world. Asanda, I'm going to ask you a quiz question, and I hope you get this one right. So, who said that was one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind?
Neil Armstrong.
Yes, indeed. And do you know why I'm saying this and asking you this?
Was it today when he landed on the moon?
Today in 1969, July the 21st, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon just after 2:56 UTC, Greenwich Mean Time. And I say that because, of course, American time would tell you that it was on July the 20th at 10 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And so there's this confusion often. And when did Neil Armstrong land on the moon? The Americans say it was our spaceship, it was our guy, it was the 20th of July. But of course, the whole world uses UTC, or Greenwich Mean Time, which is 0 longitude. And that was 3 a.m. in the morning on the 21st of July. Neil Armstrong became the first human to set foot on the moon, followed by Buzz Aldrin, of course.
Final hour of Rise and Shine. Thank you for staying with us. As Channel Africa, at Channel Africa 1 is our handle across the different social media platforms, coming to you also via our YouTube live streaming service. SABC Plus, the app, you can also find us there, as well as www.channelafrica.co.za. In this hour, we look at the challenges around the provision of essential public services such as clean water, electricity, healthcare, education, and infrastructure development, and how that's been a frustration in our continent of Africa. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro, looking forward to that conversation. Because a lot of people are just going to tell you that we're not getting any service whatsoever. So we'll get to the bottom of that and see how different countries are doing in the region. Still to come is the news. In fact, it's coming right now as we say good morning to Tualani Tulo Ngwepe, followed by the sports headlines with Figile Lingwat.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Senior Communication Officer at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Ernest Cornell, says the charges against arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi will not stand in court. Mwangi was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of facilitating terrorist attacks linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. The Directorate of Criminal Investigation said on X that detectives had arrested Mwangi at his home in Machakos County at the weekend and had seized 2 unused tear gas canisters and 1 7.62mm blank round, along with 2 mobile phones, a laptop and notebooks. In addition, Mwangi is also due to be arraigned for unlawful possession of ammunition. Cornell says Kenyans will attend court in solidarity with Mwangi.
We expect, of course, the Director of Public Prosecution to see through the scheme that the government is employing, to see through it that these are malicious charges. These are charges that won't stand any test of law, and these are charges that cannot be prosecuted. And therefore, we expect that the DPP will have this case dropped immediately.
South Africa's Chief Justice Mandi Samaya has issued directions in former President Jacob Zuma and the MK Party's legal challenge against President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to place Police Minister Senzo Mchunu on special leave. This after Zuma and the Umkhonto weSizwe Party filed papers in the Apex Court to challenge the said decision, as well as the decision to appoint Professor Firoz Kachalia as acting Police Minister and the establishment of a judicial commission of inquiry. The said directions set a number of deadlines for interested parties, namely those who wish to oppose the application must file their answering affidavits on or before Tuesday, the 22nd of July 2025. In addition, any interested parties that wish to intervene in support of the main application must file their intervention applications on or before the end of the day. Still in South Africa, Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister David Mahlobo has assured the public that the levels of water contamination by antiretroviral drugs in South Africa's water resources will not affect the standard of drinking water. Mahlobo's comments follow a research that was conducted jointly by the Northwest University's Unit for Environmental Sciences Management and the Water and Sanitation Department's Water Research Commission. The study revealed rather significant concentrations of ARVs in water resources, particularly downstream of wastewater treatment plants. It also found that concentrations of ARVs in some water sources exceeded acceptable thresholds, posing potential long-term health risks to humans. However, Mahlobo says the level of contamination is too low, such that it won't pose any health hazard.
With the very levels of the ARVs that has been traced, they are so negligible that it's not even easy to quantify. They are actually measured at a level of nanogram, which is 1 divided by 8 billion grams, which is a very, very small number out of the 72 samples that were taken. At this stage, there is no need for worry because even ARVs, they don't have any microbial or chemical component that will be actually affecting the standard of drinking water in our country and other issues.
South Africa's Department of Health says it is embarking on a massive campaign to encourage members of the public to donate body organs and tissues in a bid to save lives. The department says there's reluctancy to donate organs due to cultural and religious stereotypes. Department spokesperson Foster Mohale says members of society can donate organs while still alive or issue instructions to have their organs donated after they've passed. Mohale says there are more than 2,000 patients waiting organ and tissue donors across the country.
Definitely, there are about over 2,500 people who are on the active waiting list to receive either organ or tissue in South Africa. So this is the only list that we know. So we've realized that because of lack of knowledge, but because of cultural or religious barriers, which we believe that as the department working with our partner organizations like Organ Donor Foundation and other organizations, we can be able to change people's perceptions around the issue of organ and tissue donation and save lives.
The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says an Israeli military evacuation order for central Gaza has dealt another devastating blow to efforts to keep people alive in the war-ravaged territory. Yesterday, Israel ordered Palestinians in the Deir al-Balah to move south due to military operations. The BBC's Ian Skippers has more.
Many of the people in central Gaza ordered to move were already displaced. Whole families were seen lugging their few belongings once again. The United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs says the order will limit the ability of aid agencies to move around, choking humanitarian access where it is needed most. The UN also repeated its warnings that many Gazans are dying from hunger and need an urgent influx of food as Israel continues to strictly limit the flow of aid. One woman told the BBC people were surviving on water and salt.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, star sprinter Akani Simbine struggles on wet London track while Zegnene takes bronze. And Super Falcons resume training ahead of semi-final showdown with South Africa. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge aka Binal Export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Stella Longwe,
pamalonje.
palitu sokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndi katswiri oyimba ameneyu ndi katswiri wa dziko la malawi amene akukhala mdziko la south africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi big nick malawi yatiuzani kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwinobwino kwambiri chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwinobwino.
Ayi aziwoneka chiliyonse chikutheka pomva magrasi anu apa mwaka akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu johannesburg.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
8 minutes past 8 Central African Time. We're talking now the challenges around the provision of essential public services, especially within the SADC community, which is the Southern Africa Development Community, and how these have been a frustration in Africa. Citizens frequently voicing discontent through protests and demonstrations over inadequate provision of these essential services promised to them by their governments. Now, the Public Service Commissioners in the Southern Africa Development Community, or SADC, held a forum in Namibia last week to discuss how governments can fast-track the delivery of public services, looking at issues of how we access public service and what we do in terms of measuring public service in different governments and those different indexes and how they can feed into research and what needs to happen moving forward. So let's look at the challenges around the provision of in the SADC region. We speak to Professor Somadoda Fikeni, who is chairperson of the Public Service Commission of South Africa and the SADC Forum. Professor Fikeni, thank you for joining us. How are you this Monday? Professor Fikeni, good morning.
Fine. Thank you for calling me. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you making time for us as Channel Africa this morning.
Yes.
So let's talk then. The SADC.
Yes.
The SADC Public Service Commission met in Namibia last week, established a year ago with the aim of assessing public service delivery in the region. What does the Commission look at exactly in terms of measuring public service in the different governments it falls under?
The main aim of the forum is to make sure that we deepen collaboration between ourselves and learn from each other, and also enforce professionalization of public service in order to assist each administration in achieving its objectives. So the main thing there is that collaboration. There are many other things that are needed today for public service to be effective. For example, the issue of being ethical and built around certain principles and values. The issue of adopting the modern digital technologies in order to improve efficiency, and also fighting corruption, ensuring that you actually build the capacity of public service. So as these oversight and accountability institutions, we felt that it is important to learn from each other, not to reinvent the wheel if it is already working in other countries.
What tools does the Commission use to measure the effectiveness of public service in the countries involved?
Each one of the public service commissions will have the tools to monitor, for example, the one of assessing performance. The other one is the one of making sure that you determine the disclosure of those who might be doing business outside government or with government, to see if there is no conflict of interest in between those. And we also have several tools for recruitment, tools for performance management, and those will vary sometimes from government to government depending on how they've contracted the employees, but the principle is still the same.
A year in, have there been notable information captured by the Southern Africa Development Community Forum in terms of how that could inform intervention measures?
Indeed, we have, for example, realized that if you integrate the information and digitally store the information, it is easier to do this performance assessment rather than to do it manually. And also that integration of information means different agencies of the state, whether it's the Auditor General and it's the financial intelligence, as well as other agencies, should actually have a repository of information in one space such that you know how each department is performing, you know how some senior civil servants especially are performing and their conduct thereof. So those are some of the approaches that have been adopted, but we are just 1 year old at a formative stage. We will be deepening this collaboration in all these various areas and share reform programs in each one of the countries, something that we're already doing because the entire SADC, in one form or another, is undergoing transformation. In the case of South Africa, it's the implementation of professionalization framework. It is also the strengthening of the public service, commission in order to make sure that its findings and directives are implemented.
Let's talk some of the challenges and issues in public sector that were addressed at the 2025 SADC Public Service Commission Forum General Meeting.
There are many challenges, the first one being the one of resourcing of these public service commissions. Because sometimes some governments, if not many, misunderstand the notion of public service and tend to focus on policies. We want to grow the economy, we want to fight corruption, we want to do A, B, C, D, E, and we want to improve investor confidence and service delivery. But they focus on those specific programs in isolation without taking the whole ecosystem of public service, because public service is the engine that will enable them to implement those. That's why investing in building the capacity, in professionalizing public service and making sure that it is technically competent and ethical is one of the most important investments. But most of the time people believe if I invest in roads, I'll start seeing the road next year. And yet, if you also invest and you don't cut resources for public service, training, capacity building, and accountability institutions such as the public service commissions, then you are going to yield results in all different spheres where you want to implement. It is an enabler. So the challenge has been that misunderstanding by many treasuries, many finance ministers, to think that this is but a footnote of many other things which are major, when in fact the major thing is to build state capacity through building public service. Then the rest of other things, you'll see them being implementable.
16 minutes past 8 Central African time. If you've just joined us, we are in conversation with Chairperson of the Public Service Commission of South Africa and the SADC Forum, South Africa Development Community Forum. This is Professor Somadoda Fikeni looking at the challenges around the provision of public services on our continent, specifically in this region of the Southern African Development Community, with the backdrop of a meeting of public service commissioners in SADC. Professor, the Africa Development Bank announced the first Public Service Delivery Index, a report measuring the effectiveness of public service. Top performers from their research were Mauritius, Egypt, South Africa, Senegal, Ghana, and Morocco. What about these countries places them favorably in achieving public service goals? They also do not operate within the same region, so it's quite interesting that we've got different regions of Africa represented here.
One of the first things that you notice across these countries is stability, especially the stability of the public service, which is generally insulated even from political changes. Therefore, you have institutional memory, you have retention of skills. The second one, the adoption of technologies for greater degree of efficiency. And you see countries such as Mauritius have gone all the way, and they are quite advanced in implementing e-governance or digital technologies to improve monitoring, to improve services, tracking of services, and so on. And those, to me, I think are two very important things to look at. But of course, you do have in the same institutions the training of public servants, which sometimes is conducted by the universities, is conducted by specialized institutions like the School of Government, and they've even paired themselves with countries such as your Singapore and such as your other advanced, countries which are already having very professional, seasoned public service. So all those combined, and of course, leadership appreciating the importance of this delivery tool, this enabler called public service, have been responsible for these countries achieving higher on the performance index.
When it comes to public service outcomes, can we generalize it in terms of how African governments need to ensure the delivery of these public service outcomes?
Indeed, there are certain basic principles, irrespective of the kind of a political system you have. Those basic principles is precisely the issue of the insulation and the protection of public service, so that it is not confused with the transitions when you move from one administration after 5 years or after every election to the next one. Even when you have the change of governments or the change of the ruling parties, if you keep your core professional public service in place, and it is also a non-political public service, it is loyal to any administration that comes in and is prepared to implement those, especially when they are for common good. The second one is the embrace of technologies and the utilization of those for greater efficiency, especially at the time when we are dealing with big data, massive data in the 21st century. Technologies can make that work easy, and it can make it accessible in many ways. But of course, that assumes you do not have the digital divide where the poor and the rich have different experience of access to technology. That is key. The infrastructure for this ecosystem is important. And the third one is the emphasis on ethical leadership, both the political leadership as well as the administrative leadership, so that you do not have unlawful instructions which lead to corruption, and the emphasis on people being a people-centered, service-oriented development-oriented approach, because at times the challenge that we've seen is when public services only focus on compliance, on basic systems, instead of understanding that ultimately whatever they do must have an impact on ordinary people and bring dignity to them.
Are there certain sectors that should be prioritized when it comes to service delivery?
Certainly, there are certain sectors which are quite crucial for any nation. For example, if you talk of home affairs, of course, it could be given a different name in other countries. That's where your population register from birth to death. That's where you do have issuance. And that's where you know how many people you have, and therefore you begin to plan for them. That is key. The second one, of course, would have to be a local government, because that's where you get a government nearest to the people, where basic services such as your water, sanitation, electricity, and so forth are provided for. That has to be effective, because people will feel it almost immediately. Provides that basic infrastructure at local levels. Even areas that we do not pay much attention to, such as your statistics and planning units of these governments, because that's where you gather intelligence and you monitor the impact of what you are doing. And of course, depending on the governments, you do have the one of the economic affairs, the social security, where old age people or any of the vulnerable groups are serviced. So those are very much basic and fundamental, but ultimately, for your human resource development strategy, education and training should be at the core, because that's how you form characters, that's how you prepare people with skills, not just for now, but for future, and for future types of jobs that will emerge to give a competitive advantage.
Talking of a competitive advantage, the inaugural Public Service Delivery Prize for Africa will be awarded in 2027. Do you think this will be in any way motivation for countries to pull up their socks, so to speak, when it comes to public service efforts?
Certainly, it should be part of the bucket list of things that should encourage countries to build the capacity of their states and therefore have effective service delivery. The recognition thereof of this public service is very much important. We will be approaching SADC itself, we will be approaching African Union as well as the African peer review mechanism to say, let's make and mainstream public service capacity building and public service professionalism.
As it stands, in your opinion, who would you say is most competitive to likely receive this prize in 2027, and why?
In a space of 2 years in government and in politics, it's a very long period. There are many other things that we see in the geopolitics of today, the volatility. So it would be difficult at this stage to say which countries would be receiving that. And also it would be prejudging, just in case some people and some of us are invited to say, can you assist us with the assessment? So I can't foretell which countries are likely to get that. All we can say, every country that pulls up its socks, that begin to professionalize, that begin to take service, public service seriously, it stands a chance to win.
How should resources be mobilized and distributed among regional states to ensure that there is some type of equal distribution? You mentioned that those who are struggling need to have some assistance in terms of public service, and then in turn equal ability to deliver on service delivery.
That is at the very core of the creation of this public service forum of SADC. to say some countries will struggle, for example, to purchase a software that could be worth 50 million. And some will struggle to come up with a sector-specific program or software or program that is designed. But once we begin to share some of these expertise, help each other to reform, share some of the customized programs that we will have developed without having to go through the expenses of doing that, you'll begin to see even countries which are smaller, whose economies may not absorb such costs, benefiting from this, and we begin to see standardization that is very crucial for integration of the region and ultimately of the continent. When you talk of continental free trade agreement, it assumes that you have a seamless process that is harmonized across countries. So once you begin to share experiences in this forum, other countries will not have to wait for years to reform certain things. We will be able to dispatch each other's public service commissioners, or we will be able to pull resources from entities such as your United Nations Development Program or any other major sponsors which might be there, and be ready to have a footprint across both from multinational entities as well as from the private.
How much of accountability?
So
Yes.
that in itself leaves no one behind.
Yeah. How much of accountability should rest on the public servants themselves? You touched on an issue of training efforts for public service. When it comes to this topic, over and above accountability resting on governments?
Well, we emphasize, even in the training programs, in everything else, to say it is the public servant who should not always use the systems and other things to say, I'm waiting for them to change. It is us who should change and be the change that we wish for. Hence, it is very much important, even as you do training, as you do all these other things, that ultimately the values of change should be intrinsic within each public servant, within each public service commission. Then you will begin to see a sea of change beyond that.
Professor Fikeni, we appreciate your time again as Channel Africa. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And that's where we end that chat with Professor Somadoda Fikeni, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission of South Africa and the SADC Forum, looking at challenges around the provision of public service in the SADC region. Interesting countries there having come up from the index they called the Africa Development Bank, their first public service delivery index, noting top performers as Egypt, Mauritius, South Africa, Senegal, Ghana, and Morocco. Don't know how you feel about that, if you have any surprises there, or if you would have expected that those would be the top performers. But anyway, we leave that there, that chat for now. At 8:30 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, Senior Communications Officer at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Ernest Connell, says the charges against arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi will not stand in court. Mwangi was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of facilitating terrorist acts linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. South Africa's Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister David Mahlobo has assured the public that the levels of water contamination by antiretroviral drugs in South Africa's water sources will not affect the standard of drinking water. And finally, a rights group says clashes have again broken out in the Syrian province of Sweda, where more than 1,000 people have been killed in a week of sectarian violence. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's catch you up with some sports with my fellow Man United supporter. We're excited about the players we're buying. I hope it'll mean a better season for us. Fikile Lingwati, as you bring us the sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
We start off with football news. Nigeria Super Falcons have returned to training barely 24 hours after their emphatic 5-0 quarterfinal victory over Zambia at the 2024 African Women's Nations Cup. Without taking a rest day, the 9-time African champions hit the pitch on Sunday to begin preparations for their high-stakes semi-final clash against defending champions South Africa, scheduled for Tuesday. The encounter promises to be a thrilling battle between the two of the continent's top sides, with a coveted place in the final on the line. In the second semi-final, tournament host Morocco will face Ghana. Winners from both ties will meet in the final, while the losing teams will contest the third-place match. On to athletics. South African sprint champions Akani Simbine competed alongside top-class sprinters at the London Diamond League meeting, where he was vying to win his fourth consecutive Diamond League Series title. However, the script was torn apart by Oblique Saville of Jamaica, who posted a dramatic victory in a sizzling 9.86 seconds. Our UK correspondent Gesho Mnyati asked Simbine after the race what is next for him.
For me, it's just to make sure that I'm getting race fit and race sharp and getting back to the legs moving. You know, we've been in a very big block of training right now for like 7 weeks, and now we're coming out with it. So, hey, we'll see how it goes for the rest of the season, but looking forward to it, and looking forward to champs in September.
In as far as the Diamond League is concerned, Simbine is the top athlete at the moment, and he's poised to win the top prize. But he says he's not there yet.
Not really. You have to run the Diamond League final to win the jackpot prize. But being on top, we've done 4 Diamond Leagues, 3 wins, and then this one was just a terrible one. But I know I'm guaranteed the final, and I'm happy about that. And now it's just to focus on, getting the legs moving and getting race sharp again.
And finally, with the cricket news, the Proteas advanced to the final of the T20 International Tri-Series in Harare with a 7-wicket victory over host Zimbabwe on Sunday, a result that also eliminated Zimbabwe from contention. Debutant Ruben Herman struck a 36-ball 63, his maiden T20 International half-century, while Rassie van der Dussen remained unbeaten on 52 as South Africa chased down Zimbabwe's total of 144 for 6 with 16 balls to spare. The win ensured South Africa and New Zealand a place in the final, with Zimbabwe winless after 3 matches. Herman says the new ball was hard to face.
But I think one thing we identified is the new ball is quite tough on these wickets because there is a bit of invariable bounce and invariable pace. So the new ball is probably the toughest time to bat. So I think, and then after that, Zim also did well to come back after losing a couple of early wickets. But then I think probably the difference lied in, I think we were just maybe just more ruthless in the batting department with bad balls. We were good at running twos as well. So I think the batsmanship was good from our part because we ran a lot of twos within our boundaries as well. So I think probably that's where the difference lies. Is we just were a bit more ruthless in the way we scored maybe.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lengwadi.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, the South African Trade Union Solidarity weighs in on the Fly SA Fair strike as that airline has confirmed several of its planes have been grounded because of a wage dispute. Well, Unosipho Zuma will give us the details on that as she brings us the business news. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the South African Trade Union Solidarity has described Day one of its 2-week strike as successful after FlySafair confirmed several of its planes have been grounded amid a wage dispute. Now, this is despite earlier reassurances that operations would not be affected by the start of the strike. FlySafair pilots have rejected the airline's 5.7% wage increase offer instead of their 10% increment. Solidarity's Deputy General Secretary Helgard Crunch.
Throughout last week and over the weekend, they indicated that there will be minimal impact. And then last night at about 10 o'clock, we saw on their website and on some of their social media platforms that they've indicated that a lot of flights are being cancelled. I quickly counted more than 20 flights that are being cancelled. So I think it's a very good indication that they aren't able to sustain their flight schedule, and to me it seems as though they delayed it as late as possible to communicate that to the South African public.
South Africa is taking a decisive action against the ongoing foot and mouth disease outbreak affecting provinces including KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Gauteng and the Free State Province. The Department of Agriculture, in partnership with the Agricultural Research Council and other key stakeholders, is hosting a high-level national indaba today and tomorrow in Rhodeplat, Pretoria. The event brings together top veterinary and agricultural experts to develop long-term solutions aimed at eradicating the disease, which has severely impacted the red meat trade and livestock sector. Minister of Agriculture John Steenhuisen and Deputy Minister Nokuzola Kaba will lead discussions on strategies including stricter biosecurity, vaccination and animal movement control. The founder of Karen Beef Company, Dirk Verwoerd, comments.
The economic destruction that we at Karen Beef have experienced is enormous, and that has made a major impact on the availability of beef for the consumer and food security in general.
Mining company BHP Group has opted to sell its interest in the $2.5 billion Kabanga nickel project in Tanzania to its partner Lifezone Metals for as much as $83 million. The NYSE-listed company will acquire BHP's 17% equity interest in Kabanga Nickel Limited, the majority owner of the Kabanga nickel project in northwestern Tanzania. The company issued a report on Friday that put development costs for the project at $2.49 billion. It is expected to produce around 50,000 metric tons of nickel annually once fully ramped up, a process that will take 6 years, including construction. And finally, oil prices are little changed as traders assess the impact of new European sanctions on Russian oil supply, while they also worry about tariffs possibly weakening fuel demand as the Middle East producers are raising output. Brent crude futures fell 1 US cent to $69.27 a barrel after settling 0.35% lower on Friday. US West Texas Intermediate crude was at $67.44 a barrel, up 10 cents following a 0.30% decline in the previous session. Now, finally, China's shipments of rare earth magnets to the United States have jumped sharply in June. The rebound came after months of disruption and signaled renewed momentum in critical mineral trade between the two countries. The spike follows a June agreement aimed at easing tensions over the export of these strategically important materials, which are essential for electric vehicles, wind turbines, and other high-tech industries. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,530 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 bula 30. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 71, and in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 08. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 579. Russia is 78 rubles 424. India is 86 rupees 14. China it's 7 yuan 17. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 68. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,354 and platinum at $1,427 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $69.37 a barrel. Now, for any news stories or any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Posoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus, anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The world celebrates and observes a World Brain Day on July the 22nd each year, and the spotlight this year will be falling on a growing global health crisis, and that's dementia. Once seen as a natural consequence of aging, dementia is now understood to be influenced by modifiable lifestyle and health factors that begin as early as childhood. And whilst the numbers are rising globally, Sub-Saharan Africa is expected to bear a growing share of that burden, with the cases set to nearly double every 20 years. Now, the good news, though, is that experts say that over 40% of dementia cases could be prevented through early interventions ranging from education and nutrition to managing conditions like diabetes and hypertension. Well, joining us now to unpack what this means for South Africa and the continent is Dr. James Butler, who's the Executive Board Member of the Neurological Association of South Africa. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Butler. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners, and thanks for having us.
So let's begin with this whole idea of dementia. Let's define it. What is dementia?
Well, essentially, as you and the listeners will know, the brain's functioning is multifaceted, and it's when the brain's functioning declines at a rate that exceeds what would be expected for age. So just as we age and physically run more slowly with time, so the brain there are acceptable or accepted rates of decline of various cognitive functions. But if these decline at a pathological rate, and it can start at any age, and if it involves more than one brain function, as it were, one domain, what we would call a domain, then that's a dementia. And it obviously has many causes, but that's it in a nutshell.
And it's not age-related. We've always thought that it's an old person's disease, dementia. As you say, there's a normal amount of degeneration, if I can use that word, but the excess can happen at any time.
Well, yes, it can. You certainly can get rare brain diseases that cause dementias in little kids, for instance. But it is age-related in the sense that if you take 1,000 or 100 people at a particular age, the incidence rises. So by the time you get to 80 or 85, there's a much higher rate of dementia than there is, say, in 60-year-olds.
All right, so there is some light at the end of the tunnel. This suggestion that 40% of dementia cases are preventable. Is that true? And what is it that we need to do?
Yeah, so those are data that are modeled on available data that we have. It's not possible to do the perfect experiment where you get half the people to do the interventions and the other half not. But that's the best way, or those are the best numbers that the world can come up with. And to answer your question, what can we do? Well, the way of thinking about it is this, is that we each have a complex genotype, a whole lot of genes that determine how our brains work and how they decline, how the brain declines with age. And it varies a bit from one person to the next. But some people's genetic makeup, by virtue of many genes, makes them prone to dementia. So that's not to say that there's one gene causing dementia. There are many genes that predispose you. But then, like all things in life, and particularly your brain, you've got to look after it very carefully. And if you get a lot of things in life right, then you will prevent that from happening. And it's a cumulative process. So while it might only present at 70 or 80, and as I said, a high percentage of people over the age of 80 or 85 have dementias, if you want to avert that, then there's no point in making changes at that time. The horse has bolted. The years of the missed opportunity is gone, and it's a little bit like the inverse of compound interest. You compound things over years in a good sense with compound interest, and with in a bad way when you live life in a manner which doesn't protect your brain, and those things compound. And then they've multiple factors. So it's all the basics, the things your mother told you, which is get your sleep regularly, properly, get some exercise, eat proper food, and those are the basics. And then look after yourself, which is watch your weight, because we know weight is associated with vascular disease, which affects the brain, blood vessels. The brain is critically dependent on blood vessels. Don't smoke, because that has similar effects. Alcohol has been shown, no matter what quantity, the more you drink, the worse it is for the brain, in a linear manner. And then don't put substances into your brain. Exercise, get fresh air, all those sorts of things, which evolutionarily, in fact, were good for us.
So where along that compound interest curve is it still okay to maybe change the course of history a little bit? 30, 40? Where do we think it's probably going to be the cutoff?
Well, the science shows that it's never too late, in fact. So even if you take people with existing dementia who are stimulated in some way, while you don't reverse the dementia, you certainly improve their function in an everyday way. So people who are demented, who don't get out of chairs and walk, etc., that's bad for their brain. If they're left socially isolated, that's bad for their brains. So it's never too late, and whether you're 60 or 70, never too late to start. And the more of the factors you attend to, the better for your brain.
So we read articles that suggest do crossword puzzles and Sudoku and things like that, and that will help prevent dementia. Is there any evidence to show that?
Well, I think the evidence shows that the more you stimulate and educate the brain, the more you are protected against dementia. But I think, like a diet where people focus on single ingredients, the brain is a complex organ and it needs to be stimulated in multiple ways. So clearly, doing Sudokus and crossword puzzles is good for the brain, but that on its own is not is a small little drop in the ocean, as it were.
All right. So are there any telltale signs or early warning signs that we should take note of, that we say, okay, look, maybe this is something I need to go get checked out?
Yeah, good question. So the short answer is if you think your brain is malfunctioning, or there's a precipitous decline in some component of your cognitive functioning, and it might be that people you know's names are suddenly just disappearing, you can't find them, they feel like they're in the tip of your tongue, or your memory has suddenly declined quickly. And as I said earlier, we do, as we get older, have little problems with those. Or you notice, and this is a different part of the brain, you notice that someone's behavior has changed insidiously, where they don't have the drive they had before, and their judgment is going. Those are all signs. And to stress again, a dementia is not one domain, it's multi-domain. And so if you notice that in yourself, or you notice that in family members or friends, then always ask the question. And even general practitioners can do quick screening tests to tell you where you are and whether you need to be worried or not.
Are there effective treatments nowadays for dementia?
So that's very much depends on the cause. So if you take the bulk of the dementias, which are conditions like Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and then the frontotemporal dementias, those we don't have effective treatments that are readily available. Some of the listeners may be aware of the fact that we have treatments that are targeting something called certain proteins in the brain, and there's the treatments are in their very early phases, and they're extraordinarily expensive. So we're in the early stages, and perhaps we're on the cusp of some major breakthroughs in the treatment of dementia. But for the time being, we have to go the preventative route. There are rare forms of dementia, or uncommon ones, should I say, where there are particular causes which are treatable. So sometimes people who are severely depressed, for instance, will look like they're demented, and that's treatable. Sometimes they're rare things like vitamin B12 deficiency or thyroid deficiency, which can cause a dementia, which when you treat them, they get better.
So some people might be getting worried now, and they think, oh, I've forgotten this, or can't remember that. Is that something to worry about, or is this a common thing?
Yeah, it's incredibly common. So the human memory system is, in fact, very poor if you think about it. We designed to forget, not to remember. And most things in our lives, even in the preceding 24, 48 hours, we forget. And you know, one can speculate on why, but perhaps it's evolutionarily, it's protective. Otherwise, we all be walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder, thinking about all the traumas we've been through. So we're imperfect in cognitive functioning in every way, and we have to recognize that imperfection, and we have to recognize that there is an insidious decline, gradual, but which still allows us to function as we age.
Viewers on World Brain Day, what should we be thinking about?
Sorry, I missed part of that. The sound was lost.
Sorry, I was just saying, what's your final message to people on World Brain Day that you want to get across?
Well, it's what I've told my children for many years, which is of everything that you've ever owned, that you currently own, and that you will ever own, your brain is your most precious asset. Look after it, nurture it, feed it, protect it against bad things. And you should do that over a long, long period. Walk around with it like it is your most precious asset, and think carefully about that.
Dr. Butler, thank you so much indeed. Yeah, great advice. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Take care, and to your viewers, take care.
Thank you. So that's Dr. Butler talking to us about World Brain Day. And yeah, so ladies, we've got Palesa in studio now to tell us what's coming up on the move. Do you take care of your brain?
I think so. I hope so.
Bless you.
I think the best I can do is really hope so. I'll do my best.
Excellent. So, on the move, what's coming up?
Well, today from 9 to 12 p.m. on The Move, firstly, in the first hour, we speak about this habit that's, sort of becoming quite popular. And everyone, a lot of people are doing it now. Like, you go home after a long day, every day is a long day, and you're like, oh, let me unwind with a glass of wine. So it's called the wine o'clock culture. And we'll be joined by Kerry Rootman from Brain Harmonics, another brain person who's been working with women who are navigating the hidden battles of trying to mask that hard day with a glass of wine. We'll be chatting about that in the first hour of the show. And then we move on into our second hour. Today's African View debate, we're asking the question, is polygamy more honest as a form of relationship than monogamy is in African relationships.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
There's also the informal polygamy.
Right, yeah. But I mean, polygamy in itself is not supposed to be informal, right? It's supposed to be honest, it's supposed to be open, and everyone who participates should have consented freely.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
They say, you're talking about wine o'clock, they say a glass of red wine is great for your heart health. I wonder if it's also great for your brain health.
I wonder. But also, I mean, are we doing it for the heart health ever? Or is it just like, it just makes me feel so good?
Because it never is just one glass, is it?
Yeah, no, it never usually is just one glass. We wrap up with our nutrition and fitness corner. And it's also another trend that's been making waves. It's matcha. So matcha in tea, matcha in food. We're finding out exactly what this matcha is and how it's exploding globally. We'll be chatting to Lerato Letlhake, who's a global wellness advocate. Chat to us about matcha.
What's in matcha?
I have no idea. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I think it looks so cool. It's green. It's this bright green color, and people are also like using it in their homes, and it's got all these nice tools. So I think it looks cool. It's trendy. It makes sense, but I don't think a lot of us know what it actually is.
Have you tasted it before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
You?
No.
I
don't even know what it is.
Then stay tuned.
All right, then on the move coming up after the news.
SABC News.
Right, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on today's edition of Rise and Shine, right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African's perspective.
My name is Asanda Beda. We'll be together again tomorrow, 6 till 9. And make sure you stay with Channel Africa as On the Move is coming up with Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. Our news update first, though, with Jwalani Tulongwepe. Bye-bye from us.
And for me, Peter Ndoro, also have an awesome day. And don't forget to take care of your brain. It's World Brain Day today. And as the good doctor was saying, it is the most powerful and most important asset that you have. It is now time for the news and sport headlines. Coming up right now with Jwalani Tulongwepe and Fikile Lingwati. Goodbye.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Top stories: Asawa, prominent Kenyan human rights activist, expected to appear in court, and clashes have again broken out in the Syrian province of Sweda. Good morning. Senior Communication Officer at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Ernest Connell, says the charges against arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi will not stand in court. Mwangi was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of facilitating terrorist act linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. The Directorate of Criminal Investigation said on X that detectives had arrested Mwangi at his home in Machakos County at the weekend and had seized 2 unused tear gas canisters and 1 7.62mm blank round, along with 2 mobile phones, a laptop and notebooks. In addition, Mwangi is also due to be arraigned in unlawful possession of ammunition. Cornell says Kenyans will attend court in solidarity with Mwangi.
We expect, of course, the director of public prosecution to see through the scheme that the government is employing, to see through it that these are malicious charges. These are charges that won't stand any test of law, and these are charges that cannot be prosecuted, and therefore we expect that the DPP will have this case dropped immediately.
South Africa's Chief Justice Mandi Samaya has issued directions in former President Jacob Zuma and the MK Party's legal challenge against President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to place Police Minister Senzo Mchunu on special leave. This after Zuma and the Umkhonto weSizwe Party filed papers in the Apex Court to challenge the said decision as well as the decision to appoint Professor Firoz Kachalia as acting police minister and the establishment of a judicial commission of inquiry. The said directions set a number of deadlines for interested parties, namely that those who wish to oppose the application must file their answering affidavits on or before Tuesday, the 22nd of July 2025. In addition, any interested parties that wish to intervene in support of the main application must file their intervention applications on or before the end of today. The Human Sciences Research Council in South Africa, HSRC, says if prosecutorial action is not taken to meet public expectations, then there will be an erosion of confidence in Commission of Inquiries. This comes after President Cyril Ramaphosa instituted a Judicial Commission of Inquiry to investigate allegations relating to the infiltration of law enforcement, intelligence and associated institutions within the criminal justice system by criminal syndicates. Earlier this month, KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi publicly stated that there were criminal syndicates infiltrating police. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has since been placed on special leave. The HSRC's Dr. Benjamin Roberts explains the research they've conducted about Commission of Inquiries.
We've actually done in-depth research on attitudes towards the Zondo Commission. We've done about 3 or 4 years of in-depth assessment of public views towards that particular Commission of Inquiry. And it is along the lines of what you thought. The public is generally favourable towards the way the Commission handled itself procedurally, are favourable in terms of some of the recommendations. They're very concerned, however, about implementation of those recommendations. There are lingering issues about whether these commissions are deemed to be value for money.
Still in South Africa, Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister David Mahlobo has assured the public that the levels of water contamination by antiretroviral drugs in South Africa's water resources will not affect the standard of drinking. Mahlobo's comments follow a research that was conducted jointly by the Northwest University's Unit for Environmental Sciences and Management and the Water Sanitation Department's Water Research Commission. The study revealed significant concentrations of ARVs in water resources, particularly downstream of wastewater treatment plants. It also found that concentrations of ARVs in some water sources exceeded acceptable thresholds, posing potential long-term health risks to humans. However, Mahlobo says the level of contamination is too low that it won't pose any health hazard.
With the very levels of the ARVs that have been traced, they are so negligible that it's not even easy to quantify. They are actually measured at a level of nanogram, which is 1 divided by 1 billion grams, which is a very, very small number out of the 72 samples that were taken. At this stage, there is no need for worry because even ARVs, they don't have any microbial or chemical component that will be actually affecting the standard of drinking water in our country and other issues.
A rights group says clashes have again broken out in the Syrian province of Beda, where more than 1,000 people have been killed in a week of sectarian violence. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says tribal fighters have attacked outlying villages where houses are burning. Bedouin fighters and their tribal allies have withdrawn from Beda city, but they remain in the outskirts. Lawrence Snouri is a member of one Syrian tribe.
We are committed to the ceasefire announced by the Syrian government, but we will remain in this location and will break the ceasefire if the Druze violate the agreement.
Recapping the top story, the SAWA Senior Communication Officer at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Ernest Cornell, says the charges against arrested prominent human rights activist Boniface Mwangi will not stand in court. Mwangi was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of facilitating terrorist acts linked to deadly anti-government protests last month. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Good morning and happy Monday, Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a beautiful Monday morning. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. And whether you were working or resting, nonetheless, it's a beginning of a brand new work week. And I say work week because it's not the first day of the week, but it is the first day that we get back into the hustle and bustle of the African continent and of life. It's 7 minutes past 9 Central Africa time, and it's time for On the Move. Thank you for joining myself, Palisa Tau, and Benjamin Moshatama, who will be with you for the next 3 hours, giving you news, views, and entertainment from the African perspective. Join us on www.channelafrica.co.za, our audio bouquets, DSTV 802 and OpenView 628, and of course the SABC Plus app as well. Well, we're hitting the ground running this Monday morning with the conversations that are necessary to take place. So let's look at what those conversations are going to be today. We're going to be unpacking a habit that is quietly becoming an everyday part of women's daily lives and routines here on the African continent. And it's so-called wine o'clock. You know how people are like, yeah, it's been such a long day. Let me unwind with a glass of wine. And it's something that's also been sort of perpetuated quite a lot in TV, in movies and series. Like, oh, it's so glamorous. You come home, you pour yourself a glass of wine, you sit on the couch and you relax. And I think that normalization of it has become increasingly popular, and now more and more people, and especially women, are actually, having this wine o'clock as a part of the culture. And sometimes it's not just one glass, it can be more, but it's an everyday occurrence. We'll be joined by Carrie Rudman from Brain Harmonics, who's been working on navigating hidden battles that women go through, and how this actually shows that there is an underlying struggle of stress, anxiety, and overwhelmed, life that women are facing. So we'll go into that in the first hour of the show. It's the favorite part of a Monday morning. It's the African View that is our weekly debate here on the Move. And today we are debating the question, is polygamy more honest than monogamy in African relationships? That's an interesting one, right? Because we're not just talking about a polygamy versus monogamy conversation, but it's about the honesty of this particular relationship dynamic. Is it more honest? We'll be finding out from our two participants, Spesihle Buthelezi and Renee Hlahle, who stand on both sides of this argument. We wrap up with our nutrition and fitness corner. I've never tasted it, but I know it's becoming quite trendy and popular. We're speaking about matcha and matcha flavored products, and I've heard it absolutely everywhere. So we'll be unpacking what exactly matcha is and why its popularity has increased with Lerato Letlage, global wellness advocate, in today's final hour. Good morning, Benji.
Good morning. It is a new week. We're looking forward to the different conversations. Remember, you can be with us on social media at Channel Africa One on all platforms, from X to YouTube to Channel Africa, Facebook. You can also find us on TikTok. So all those platforms are there for you to actually check us out. So we're there to go. We're ready to go for the new week. Let's get going.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
C'est notre invitée du jour, la belle Aina Mwenze. Elle est là. Certaines l'appellent Boss Lady.
Bonjour Monsieur Jolino.
Parlez-nous un tout petit peu de vous.
Je m'appelle Boss Lady Aina. Je mets l'accent sur le nom de Boss Lady parce que je mérite cela après le travail fait. Et c'est une rémunération en titre de la personne que je suis devenue aujourd'hui. Épouse et une mère de 4 garçons. Et voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant.
Et vous vous êtes lancé dans le business. Comment c'est venu?
En tant que mère et se retrouvant dans les pays étrangers, particulièrement en Afrique du Sud, je me disais que laisser les enfants sur la charge des travailleurs ou d'une bonne, ça serait pas très intéressant. Je me suis dit, bon, je dois essayer de m'organiser et trouver un emploi que je peux faire.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
It's 11 minutes past